through a screen. That snuck under Jordan Binnington. Zuccarello goes crashing into the goaltender. Binnington goes to pick up his stick. The Wild score. How that wasn't goalie interference. Jim Montgomery right now just feeding it to Morgan McPhee. Pass to the near wing in Eriksson. Shoots, score. Wild with an answer. Back to the middle. Middleton shoots, score. Walker's side on Jordan Binnington. The Wild have now completed a 2-goal comeback. Holloway's going to grab it. Look out, his stick broke. Creates a 3-on-1. They go to the far wing and score. The Wild lead 5-4. Minnesota Wild have now gone 3-0 on the St. Louis Blues here in the regular season. The Wild move into a tie for first place, and the Blues slip further behind the wild card spots in the Western Conference.
We're doing this again. The up and down, riding the roller coaster ride. It's not as much fun as it was earlier in the season. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You're listening to BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That is what it sounded like last night right here on 101 ESPN, your home of the St. Louis Blues, as they lose 6-4, a nearly identical, literally identical score to what they had against Columbus on Saturday. Alex, that is not the kind of performance that I was anticipating last night. I did take the over, you took the under, so at least one of us had that side of things correct. However, we both got it wrong on who would win. T-Bone got that part of it right. They just started out so poorly. The first, 5 minutes of the game was like, did somebody let them know they're playing? They're starting to keep track of the score already. And then they figured it out. And for the next, 25 minutes, they looked fantastic. And then down the stretch, they once again, the ice tilted 4 different times in this game, and it was wildly in one team's direction whenever it did tilt. And when Minnesota recaptured that momentum, the Blues seemed to have no answer for it. Alex, for you, what happened last night?
They didn't manage the game properly. You go back to the Ottawa Senators game, and Jim Montgomery had comments in that post game of he thought that they managed that game about as professionally as you can ask, because Jim Montgomery didn't think they performed well against the Ottawa Senators, but he said we managed it so well that it looked better on the ice. You didn't manage that game properly at all. You had the swing, and I think the best thing that could happen for the Blues was that non-goalie interference call that led to John Merrill's goal, because Braden Shen loses his mind, Jim Montgomery loses his mind, and it's like a beast was awoken. Yeah. Pavel Buchnevich scores that goal. You get the bang, 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 3 goals in 3 minutes and 9 seconds. But once again, you didn't manage it properly, BK, because what happens? John Hines tries to get the momentum back for his team by pulling Philip Gustafsson. Mind you, that is the 3rd best goaltender in the National Hockey League this season in terms of save percentage and goals against.
And it worked.
And it worked because the Blues did not manage the puck properly midway through that 3rd period. They turned the puck over with a pointless pass to a position where there was no puck support. Minnesota picked it off, rushed up the ice, and then beat the goaltender. And then from there, it was just poor puck play after poor puck play. I know a lot of people are going to point at the goaltending, which we will discuss. But for me, goals 3, 4, and 5 from the Minnesota Wild all started because the Blues did not manage the puck properly.
I think there's some truth to that. Some of it was bad luck. We'll get into that as well. Some of it, though, was just you got to have better goaltending. And if you're going to have that kind of goaltending, you're not going to be able to get back into this thing. I did want to listen to what Jake Neighbors and Jim Montgomery had to say after the game last night. Let's start with Jim Montgomery, who sounded as down on his team as I have heard him at any point since taking over as the head coach for the Blues. Here's what he had to say after the game.
There was a lot of moments where we needed to bear down more. And, we need that kind of, I call it grit. It's just, you got to want to win that battle so that you can move pucks forward, so that you can, either live another day or produce some offense going the other way. I didn't like how we handled the adversity today.
He then went on to say, quote, I didn't think we had as much grit or as much determination as they did in the 3rd period, end quote. Here's what Jake Neighbors had to say after the game.
Yeah, there's positives, but you go up 4-2 on the road, you got to find a way to win a game. There's no excuses, and it's just not right. You want to make playoffs, you got to win those games. So, it was a great effort to battle back. Obviously not the start we wanted, but you get up 4-2, it's got to be over. Got to find a way.
Alex, I thought that the Columbus game would serve as the wake-up call. My hope is that at least this one will. because they can't play the way they did over the last 2 games and expect to make the postseason. You've been saying it for a little while now, the last week or 2. This team has got to go on a run, and not just a small little mini run. Like, you got to put together 3 wins in a row because that's the starting point of a winning streak, and then you probably got to win 3 more, and then win like 5 of the next 7. And if you can do that, you get yourself back into the spot where you can at least think of yourself as a contender. But barring a run like that, this team ain't a playoff team, man. They've got to start really putting together some wins in a meaningful way. This is the time where the schedule opens up. You've got Anaheim, you've got Columbus, you've got those 2 back-to-backs at home against Calgary, a team that you are directly competing against for one of these spots. And then Utah, another team that you are directly competing against. Like, you've got to take care of business. That was one of those games that you had to find a way to win. They had a couple of their top guys out in that one, and you didn't stack up. So the goaltending is absolutely a part of the story. Binnington was not good enough last night. I bet you he would tell you the same exact thing. Hofer was not good enough against Columbus. Alex, when you look at the advanced numbers, that was one of the worst games that we'll see from Binnington all season long.
Yeah.
Expected goals against of 1.7. Actual goals allowed, 5. That's as bad as you'll see from any goaltender this year in the NHL. What else did you make from that one?
I can't deny that. Like, look, when you score 8 goals in 2 games, you should be coming away with 4 points. Like, you can't be saying, like, yeah, we lost both games because we gave up 6 goals in each. I mean, it's such, man, the goals that were scored against Binnington, the broken stick, there's nothing you could do there. It's a 3-on-1. Like, what are you going to do in that one? The second goal, like, you can call for goalie interference. Joey and I kind of debated that last night because he was bumped, yes, but he reset himself, and it was the second shot after he was back in net to where John Merrill beat him. But the Zach Bogosian goal, the Joel Eriksson-Ek goal, the Jake Middleton goal, those are the 3 goals that when you looked at it on paper or in the actual moment and you said, did that just really go in? Because 2 of them were from defensemen that don't have elite shots. When you watched it again, there's a clear screen by the defender where Parayko's stopping in front of Justin Falk and Justin Falk stopping in front of Jordan Binnington. But if there's a screen, yes, that takes the eyes away. But I go back to the Joel Hofer game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're not tracking the puck well. Even if you've got screens, goalies typically can look around those screens and find where the puck's going so you can at least put the body in front of it. And just Binnington's not doing that. It's hard for me to say that he's been bad because he's got 2 shutouts, one against Detroit, one against Ottawa.
He's been inconsistent.
Yeah, and as much as I could say he's been inconsistent, the team has also been inconsistent in front of him.
Yep.
Because, yes, Jake Middleton beat him, and yes,
that was the goal, by the way, that I would say, like,
that was the game over.
You can't have that in that spot.
Because
it's Jake Middleton, dude.
And there's no screen
people
on that.
People didn't even want him for the Blues when he was available via trade a couple of years ago because he's a third-pair defenseman that people said is not good enough.
He's still sour.
I'm just saying, like, that is the dude that beat you last night.
Yeah.
We're not talking about Kirill Kaprizov or Joel Eriksson. We're talking about Jake Middleton.
Yeah.
That was the shot to me that it was like, okay, Benner, come on.
Yeah. And totally understandable. There was no screen there. But as much as this is like the blame pie that we always do. As much as I'm going to blame the goaltender on that, you know what teams try and do to a goaltender to beat him? They get him moving from post to post. You know what happened on that play? Robert Thomas had the puck in the far corner where Binnington was hugging the post, anticipating the shot. Thomas lost that puck battle, the grit that Jim Montgomery was talking about. He found a way, the Minnesota player, to get it across the ice through 3 Blues players and find it Jake Middleton all by himself skating into the face-off dot to take the shot past Binnington.
All right, now let's talk about the luck factor. Because there was some bad luck last night. I want to get this out of the way. People are going to be mad at me. It's fine.
How the bleep are you the one going with the luck factor in this
today,
one?
Alex. You'll take plenty of them. Today is my day to do so. It should have been goalie interference. I understand why they didn't call it, and you definitely can't challenge it because you're probably not going to win it. I think it was goalie interference. It's bad luck. It happens. Benner got absolutely rocked in the crease. He couldn't find his stick. He was preoccupied, and then finally he got it, and then boom, goal's in. It happens. Crappy luck, but it happens. That's one of them. Another one, your defenseman not once but twice breaks his stick, and one of them leads directly to a 3-on-1 puck going in the back of your own net. It's bad luck. That being said, sometimes you have to create your own luck. And at the end of the game, Alex, They had the puck basically in the offensive zone for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And you guys know I am Jordan Kyrou's biggest defender in this market. I'm not sure there's anybody on the radio that is higher on Jordan Binnington than I am.
He meant Jordan Kyrou.
Did I say Binnington?
Yeah, because, but you better back the blink down off of Jordan Binnington Kyrou. And Parayko and Big D.
Jordan Kyrou got thrown around like a rag doll at the end of that game last night. And it can happen, especially in that spot. When he's talking about grit, you hear that from Jim Montgomery after the game last night. That was the first thing that came to mind for me. I'm sure there's a million different moments that you could put in that would fit the criteria of what Monty was talking about postgame. But for me, it was watching Kyrou get pushed off of the puck time after time after time late in that game last night. Last couple of minutes, man, you had them hemmed into their own zone. 2 straight icing calls. They have a big decision there. T-Bone didn't like it. Alex, you and I both thought, you don't take the time out there, keep that same group on the ice, see if you can make this thing work where they're exhausted. You've got all of the momentum going your way. And then he puts the second group on the ice to keep that same group. I thought it was the right call. It didn't work, but I thought it was the right call. Kyrou had multiple moments in that late game situation that were exactly what Alex has been talking about, where it's like, hey, can you have this guy on the ice in those situations? I still say yes, you have to. He's one of your best goal scorers, but it looked bad.
Yeah, I mean, he got shoved off the puck by Joel Eriksson-Ek, and what he did was he didn't want to absorb the hit, and so he just kind of made the pass to get away from it. And you can't do that there. When you're trying to keep a puck alive with a pulled goaltender, you have to absorb the hit and then put the puck in a good area. And you didn't do that. So, and just as much as you're talking about Kyrou, and I agree with, guys, Thomas Buchnevich and Brandon Saad were a -10 last night.
That entire line was bad.
The other team's top line was a +4. And I understand Thomas scored a goal, Buch scored a goal. You got your top guys contributing. But they were on the ice for 4 goals against, and 3 of those were the ones that made it 4-3, 4-4, and 5-4. Your top players have to find a way to put the puck in a good area, not get shoved off of it, and lead to a play up the middle of the ice. In all facets of the game last night, with the exception of that 3-minute, 9-second span, the Blues just didn't play a team game. They were soft on puck deliveries in terms of putting it in good areas. They basically let Minnesota skate through them in the neutral zone, and you didn't get a save in the third period. This was, to me, the game. This pissed me off more than the Columbus Blue Jackets one, because that team did not have Kaprizov. It did not have Spurgeon. It lost Brock Faber in the first 5 minutes of the game.
I mean,
you know what Minnesota's talking about right now? A miraculous 192 seconds of the defenseman being on the ice and killing off that empty or pulled goaltender scenario. That's what Minnesota's talking about.
It was honestly amazing to watch.
Their top guy played 33 minutes, but you didn't capitalize when they had 5 defensemen and didn't have their number 1 goal scorer on the ice, and you let them win. And that's the narrative of this one. Does it mean the season's over? Absolutely not. But this needs to be the wake-up call that you mentioned, BK, because if this happens against Calgary, against Anaheim, against Utah, against Columbus, it's done.
I thought there were a few things from last night's game that you could look at and say, if that continues to happen, you cannot be a playoff team. Goaltending. Last 2 games, 2 different guys in net, both of whom I think are good goalies. Mm-hmm. Horrible games. And this one last night, especially from Binnington, just not a good game by him. He's got to be better. And if you don't get a better response out of Benner and or Hofer, you're not making the playoffs. Defensively, you got to be more structured in your own zone. And you can't turn the pucks over the way that they did. You talked about managing the game. That's exactly what goes into it. And then your top players, we talked about this like 2 days ago, that the top players have been their top players under Jim Montgomery. Last night, they were not. Mm-hmm. Last night was an example of what it looks like when your top line, especially to me, does not go out there and perform the way that they need to. So if those things don't change, and I think they will, but if they don't, yeah, T-Bone's going to be right. This team ain't making the playoffs. Yep. That's ultimately what it all comes down to. T-Bone's been really quiet in this segment because he's just sitting back there like, yeah, told you guys, this is who they are.
This is everything that we've seen all season long, right? Now, maybe not all 3 happen on the same occasion, or I guess 2, but one thing always happens in a game, right? Now, sometimes they can win if something happens. Like we've seen, they've had some bad goaltending performances, and they've won those hockey games before. But there's always something that pops up for this team. They're too inconsistent, and you just mentioned those things have to change. Well, I don't think they're going to change because we're past the halfway point. And I know you guys will argue that there's a new head coach. Hey, man, the roster's the roster. The roster didn't change. The coach changed. The mistakes that we've seen for 40, whatever it is, 2 games now, They're not changing. They've been too inconsistent. I don't think they're going to change that. They're going to kind of yo-yo back and forth between a 500 team because they just have one thing every night that happens to pop up that's inconsistent.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Alex Ferrario, and I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can check us out, as always, on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/101 ESPN STL. The studio cams are always powered by the Air Alliance team. It's 11:15. Your time check brought to you by Clarkson Jewelers, an officially licensed Rolex jeweler. In about 15 minutes, we will get into some NFL quick hitters, including a new name that has emerged as a possible answer for the Las Vegas Raiders head coaching search. You guys are going to find this one to be interesting, so we'll get into that in 15 minutes. Coming up next, Doug Armstrong spoke with the media yesterday about what their plans are for Dalibor Dvorsky and for Jimmy Snuggerud. We'll let you hear that next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so Doug Armstrong sounds like he's fine with slow playing the whole Dalibor Dvorsky situation. He was on a media call yesterday, Alex, following up the World Juniors, talking about how the Blues are planning to handle their prospects. And he said this about Dvorsky, quote, a lot of that will quite honestly have to do with how we play here in the NHL level. When you look at the way that we played last year, we weren't going to push for a playoff spot, and so we decided to bring up young players, specifically Bolduc and Dean, and give them an opportunity. They have to get a little bit of a role here to be able to make sure that story doesn't repeat itself. So he's basically saying, hey, listen, could Dvorsky come up and help us? Sure, but it's probably going to be a situation similar to last year if that happens. Alex, I found this to be interesting because we've talked about him coming up and potentially helping them prior to the deadline so they can find out what they have in Dvorsky. Is he ready for this before you go potentially spend assets on second-line center, for example? Sounds like they are viewing it a little bit differently. They might be viewing this as, hey, let's let him kind of marinate a little bit in the AHL. This is a tough game at the NHL level, and if you're trying to play at the end of the season in a playoff contention mode, it's even harder. And Dvorsky might not be ready for that just yet. What did you make of his comments, and does it change the way that you think they're viewing his immediate future at the NHL level?
Yeah, it did, because I originally thought, I didn't think he was going to get a taste before the deadline. I thought they were going to wait until post-deadline, and then post-deadline, I thought that's when you'd see him up here for the remainder of the season. And if this team's in any position of being in a playoff race, I don't think you're going to see Dvorsky this year. And what I mean by that is if they have a successful month of January to where they string together 5-6 wins and put themselves in this conversation, I think they're going to keep him down in the minors, because what they want him to do is they want him to take that next step. You remember when you're a kid and you go to a creek and you go find those rocks and you just jump from one to the other, but you kind of feel like you kind of got big cojones and like, I'm going to jump from this one to 3 rocks over. And then typically you miss it and you jump in the water. You're looking at me like I've got 18 heads. You've never done this before?
I don't know where you're getting at here.
Did you ever play outside? What the Blues are doing is they're saying, we don't want to.
Does he look like he played outside?
No, you're right. You're right, dog. You're right, dog. What the Blues are saying is we don't want to jump 3 rocks and fall in the water. We want to take that one jump to the next one. What he has done. Yeah.
He landed the plane.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
That was what I was trying to figure out is, okay, where's he going with this?
I got it. What I'm saying is Dvorsky has dominated kids at the 19-year-old level. There's no point in going back to juniors, which is why he's in the AHL. He just played in his 5th World Juniors tournament, was the best player on a team that didn't even make it to the semifinals. He's good there. We don't want to jump 3 rocks and say, good, go to the NHL and win. Because you know what happens? You make mistakes, and in a team that's trying to win for the playoffs or get to the playoffs, those mistakes break confidence. And when you break confidence as a 19-year-old, it's hard to get it back, even with the best head coach. So the Blues are saying, you dominated the 19-year-olds. Now go beat up some guys that are fringe NHL players. Be the best one that you can be so that when you get to the NHL, you're here and you're not leaving. And I respect that about them. But if this team is in a playoff race and he is still playing the way that he was for Springfield from now until post-trade deadline, I would give him some cookies. I'd see what it looks like. And if he can at least remain consistent, then you can build off of that. But if he's just god-awful, which he hasn't been in the AHL, so I'm a little confused as to why you shouldn't see any time at the NHL this season, but Doug Armstrong's a smarter man than I am.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they just don't think he's ready for that. Like, just flat out. My read, when I read between the lines, and Army will do this, where he'll say things. He's not going to blatantly say the way that I just did, but if you read between the lines, you can kind of see what he's getting at, and he doesn't think that Dvorsky is ready to help this team push for the playoffs just yet. That could change a month, 2 months, 3 months from now. Maybe he performs at a level where he earned that opportunity, but right now it does not seem like that is the case, which makes me even more open to the idea that this team needs to trade for a center, man.
Yeah.
If they think they are a legitimate contender, they're going to have to go out and make that move, and if you don't see an answer on the horizon, maybe make it sooner rather than later to give yourself the best chance possible to do that.
But in defense of that, I think what Doug wants to see is, can you beat these teams in January? Because if you go 500, then you don't deserve to go get another center. What you do deserve to happen is you bring up a couple of these minor leaguers and let them play, because next year is going to be the year that you're going to be focusing more on it. You know, I will say this about the Dvorsky decision, because I'm sure there's people upset with it. I do respect Doug Armstrong because he's learning from his mistakes. They did what we were wanting them to do with Dvorsky with Jordan Kyrou. Got a little games at the NHL, put him back in the AHL, brought him back to the NHL, put him back at the AHL, and look how long it's taken us to get to the point where we're happy with Kyrou's game.
Hell, just like cross-sport comparison. Look what the Cardinals are doing.
Yeah.
they rush their prospects all the time. Mm-hmm. Look at what happened with Dylan Carlson. Look what happened with Nolan Gorman. Look at what happened with Jordan Walker, for example, Victor Scott. Like these guys continuously are pushed. And I do think there are times where it has hindered their development, especially when they're yanked up and down and then the playing time isn't there. And one of the things that he mentioned, Doug Armstrong, yesterday during his media availability was, hey, Dvorsky's playing in every meaningful situation down there. Yeah. He's a top-line player. He's on the power play. Like, he's getting every scenario that we will want him to eventually at the NHL level. If you were playing with a big league club right now, he's not getting those opportunities. He's not on your power play unit, especially not the top one. He's probably in your bottom 6. He's probably your third-line center for this team right now. I would be shocked if they put him in the top 6.
I don't even know if they'd play him at center right now. I think they'd put him on the wing, and they'd say, just go take a couple of faceoffs here and there.
And we've seen what happens with Zach Bolduc. Early in the season, healthy scratched a few times. Even lately has been healthy scratched. And he's getting, 12 minutes a night on average? So it's just not the same role that you're going to be expecting over the long haul. I don't blame them for doing it this way. I'm just a little surprised by the way that they're potentially going to handle it.
One other thing, I do look at the way that they handled, and I know it's different because it was Russia, but they handled Vladimir Tarasenko. Like, Vladimir Tarasenko, they wanted to come over. He had a contract with the KHL team, and he stayed there for a couple of extra years. But they also wanted to make sure that the team was in the right place so that when Tarasenko came over, he fit in like a glove. And I don't know if you want to put Dvorsky on this team right now because of the inconsistency we're talking about. When Vladimir Tarasenko got to St. Louis, it was almost a full season of Ken Hitchcock, and Ken Hitchcock had established the habits and the details that they wanted to play, and then Vladimir Tarasenko just fit in because of the Steens and the Backuses and the veterans that were already there. I still think it's a work in progress for the Blues in that area.
I think he's got a pretty decent situation there on that third line. Like, Neighbors and Bolduc as your wingers, that's a pretty good spot to come into, man. As a young player, there's a lot worse places in the NHL that you could...
There is, but, I mean, we've talked about it. Like, Neighbors has not been the greatest defensively in terms of how he's performed on the other side. And Zach Bolduc, we know that obviously they're not happy with it. So do you want to put a rookie centerman in that position to where even if you're playing 12 minutes a night, one shift could result in a bad
Clearly
play?
Their answer is no, but I think it's more about his own puck management right now rather than what the situation is around him. But I take your point, Alex. And the other thing that I wanted to get to, it wasn't just comments on Dalibor Dvorsky yesterday that kind of made the rounds. It was his comment about Jimmy Snuggerud that really struck me as being interesting because it seems like they view them as being at different places in their careers, which makes sense. They're different ages as well. But he said, quote, I told Jimmy Snuggerud the ultimate end of the season would be for him to pack a suitcase when he comes to St. Louis for the Final Four with that, win that, and then come to us. And what was left unsaid there, Alex, was he would play one game for the Blues at the end of the year because that would be all that he's eligible for after their Frozen Four opportunity. And then he would potentially be a part of their playoff roster. So based on his comments yesterday, Dvorsky not ready to be a part of a playoff push, much less a playoff team. Snuggerud not only good enough to be a part of their playoff push for that final game, but potentially to be a part of their playoff roster immediately upon his arrival with the team. To me, that speaks to how they view Jimmy Snuggerud right now. And we've talked about it, Alex, like how do the Blues see him? How do we see him? What is his immediate future? That spot that is currently being maintained by either Brandon Saad or Zach Bolduc, one of those two spots in the roster, that's where Jimmy Snuggerud's going to fit in.
Yeah.
Immediately.
I mean, honestly, I think you're looking at, ideally, I would say that the Blues would probably say Holloway moves up to play with Thomas and Buchnevich, and then we can put a Snuggerud with a Kyrou and Shen. And then so now you've got the top 6 there, and then your third line, we're talking about the Bolducs and then whomever's on this roster still. So that's the ideal position. I do wonder if some of this is like, hey, to get Jimmy Snuggerud to sign with the Blues out of college, it's got to be a little bit of like, hey, get to the NHL level. And I don't know what goes on in terms of those conversations, but if I'm
last year they said the same thing.
Well, yeah, but again, it's a college student versus a guy that you have, not that they don't have all the control of Snuggerud, but a guy like Dalibor Dvorsky, it's, hey, you're under our entry-level contract, you're going where we're telling you. Snuggerud, you still got to get him to sign. And so it's, hey, look, we got the NHL for you, playoffs, your first year. It's not going to ruin our entry-level contract, but you get a taste of the NHL. And I do think that if they miss the playoffs, it's going to be cool. There's the NHL. Now go to the AHL for 2 games, and you're going to play there before the end of the season. It's just reps at the pro level. But
all of that understood, Alex, but he's not saying this as a broken promise. If he's saying this, we know Doug Armstrong and the way that he operates. He will not only be on this roster, he will be playing. Yeah. And I find that to be very interesting in their handling of Jimmy Snuggerud, and it speaks to they believe he is ready for the pro game now.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the college level game, too. And we could talk with Joe about this tomorrow, who, of course, played at Northeastern. But it's just a different level of development in terms of the juniors to the AHL versus college hockey to the NHL. I don't know why, but the game just is a little bit different at the college level versus at the NHL or the AHL level. I mean, Matthew Nyes is a perfect example for Toronto. 2 years at University of Minnesota, played 3 games, then in the playoffs, and then he's been a top 6 winger for him. And I think that's why they're looking at it saying, these guys can do it. We think Snuggerud can do it also.
He's Alex T-Bone. I'm BK. Blues off tonight, back in action tomorrow against Anaheim. They begin a 4-game homestand against Anaheim, Columbus, Calgary, twice there. That is going to be a massive 4-game stretch for the St. Louis Blues. We'll see if or when we are able to see Dvorsky and Snuggerud later on this season. In 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get your questions in. But coming up next, we do have an update on a potential massive change in the coaching search right now. The Raiders are interested in a former NFL head coach. We'll tell you who that is, why it matters next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks near the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues fell the Wild last night 6-4. They are off today. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they host the Anaheim Ducks. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See him at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alex, we got a big update in the NFL. I don't know if you've seen this report. Have you seen what the Raiders are potentially trying to do?
I have not, but I'm glad to know that they're going back to Gruden.
All right, so the Raiders are interested in a former NFL head coach to potentially be their next head coach. Do you have any guesses on who that former head coach would be?
Is it John or Jay Gruden was the coach?
John was their coach.
John Gruden.
It is not John Gruden. Do you have any other guesses?
Nick Saban.
It is not Nick Saban. That's an interesting guess. He does have a connection to the person that they are actually interested in.
I'm out.
Bill Belichick, according to Tom Pelissero, has been contacted by the Las Vegas Raiders and their minority owner, Tom Brady,
of course,
about potentially pursuing the Raiders head coaching gig and whether or not he would be interested in a return to the NFL. So, this is interesting, Alex. We wondered, okay, if you're firing the head coach there, who are you going out there to get? They are reportedly going to be interviewing Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson this week as well. Tom Brady, interestingly enough, will be on the call for the Lions game this weekend. Yes, the minority owner of the Raiders, who's heavily involved in the coaching search, will be in the same arena this weekend as the Lions. Both of their coordinators are interviewing for this job, presumably with Tom Brady. So that'll be interesting to see. What do you make of this report, though, that Bill Belichick is on their radar, Alex?
How dumb are the Raiders? They waited until he took a job with North Carolina, and they're like, no, let's do the interview.
They had a head coach. They literally could not go behind his back. That is how you end up in a lawsuit, the likes of which are currently being put against the NFL.
But, Tom,
they had a black head coach, and they're potentially trying to hire Bill Belichick. This is the exact scenario the league is trying to avoid.
Yeah.
This is a disaster.
Well, welcome to the Raiders being a disaster. Like, this is why it's going to be an issue even beyond who they select as their first-round draft pick this year. This is going to be a nightmare for the Raiders, and it has been a nightmare for the last however many years, and people know that. Bill Belichick doesn't fix any of these problems, and frankly, Bill Belichick is going to bring Days of Our Lives Las Vegas edition with him if he gets hired.
I think it'd be a smart hire. I do. Who else are you getting? I mean, unless Ben Johnson legitimately wants the job, sounds like Aaron Glenn is likely to head to the New Orleans Saints. That's where he was previously. Like, okay, good fit there. I don't know that the Raiders is a good job right now. Like, you're in the same division as the Broncos with a good coach and a good quarterback, young quarterback. The Chargers, good coach, good quarterback. The Chiefs, the best coach, the best quarterback. Like, that ain't a great division to be a part of. But if you're Belichick, this is your only chance to get back to the NFL. When he took the North Carolina job, the reasoning was there's no jobs available for him in the NFL anymore. He was acting like he was breaking up with the league. No, the league broke up with Bill Belichick and said, we don't want you anymore. This is the one opportunity he might get. And it's all because Tom Brady's a part of the organization. Like, that's the connection here. I thought it would lead to them trying like hell to get Mike Vrabel. I was with the wrong Patriots connection. Instead, it is potentially going to be Bill Belichick. I think it'd be a good hire.
Yeah, I think this is just how the Raiders are trying to make it look like they're trying to be a competent organization, and this is not going to happen.
I think this would be a disaster.
Sorry, 2 weeks from now, Brady will be on the call for the Lions game. They don't play this weekend because they beat the Vikings.
You should know that, of all people.
I know.
And you act like Tom Brady's already not breaking the rules in the NFL. He's just going to keep doing it. Text your boy.
I think Belichick would be a terrible hire for the Raiders.
Really?
Because I think it's a terrible spot. I don't think, and look, I get that you have a high draft pick. We saw he can't evaluate a roster anymore. He was the guy that was making all the decisions. My guess is if he wants to come to the NFL, what's he going to want? He's going to want a GM say, or at least minimum hire a GM that he wants. That's why he took the North Carolina job, right? Not just because the NFL broke up with Belichick. The NFL broke up partially with Belichick because Belichick wanted control. And where can you get that? Well, you can definitely get that at the college level where you essentially build your own roster. So I think Belichick stays at North Carolina. I don't think that this is the perfect job for him because I think he'll look at this and go, man, I don't have a ton of years left in me in coaching. It's going to take a ton of years to get that situation figured out.
North Carolina?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think he can win at North Carolina. I don't think he can win with the Raiders.
I don't think he can win it either, to be honest with you. And I think he's going to hate recruiting. And I think he's going to realize sooner rather than later, this whole thing where I have to text a kid 100 times every week just for him to end up committing to Miami or LSU because they had a slightly higher pay scale than what we did, this ain't for me. This is not the way that I want to be spending my time. And I don't know if the Raiders are ultimately going to come to the conclusion that they will hire Bill Belichick, but I absolutely think he will and should be interested in that job. I think the buyout could be a problematic spot because the Raiders don't have a whole lot of cash on hand, so it would probably be Belichick that has to pay it himself, and it's like $10 million. It's not an easy thing to just say, okay, sweet, I'll go to the bank, grab my $10 million to put into this account. But that's an interesting one. That's a really interesting one. I thought it would be a former Patriot that would be connected to that job, just not that specific former Patriot.
Implosion, that's what's going to happen.
All right. Alex, next thing that I wanted to get to as we start preparing for the upcoming wild card weekend. I saw this yesterday. Former Eagles quarterback Ron Dvorsky was on with WIP up in Philadelphia, and he said, quote, "The Eagles are the better team. I see no way that the Packers beat the Eagles." He then continued, "I think Jordan Love is overrated. He's a solid quarterback, but he's overrated, and the Eagles will dominate up front."
I agree.
Here's my question to you, because you guys know I'm a Jordan Love supporter in every possible way. Some would call me a sycophant. I
don't know what that means, but sure.
Like Jordan Love. I think he's a really good quarterback. I can also understand people that say, a little overrated. Went on a nice run last year in the postseason, but this year, 25 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I'm supposed to be overwhelmed by that? How much do you think, Alex, his playoff performance will play into how people view him going into this offseason? Got paid last year, the obvious established quarterback in Green Bay, went 11-6. They have the youngest roster in the league. If they end up losing this weekend against Philadelphia, how will that influence the way that people view him?
I don't think it's going to change how people view him. I think people are still going to view him as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think, if anything, people are going to look at the Green Bay Packers team and say, like, they need more help. Like, I don't think the question is going to be if they get bounced by Philadelphia, it's going to be, well, Jordan Love's not that good. I think it's going to be, can we get Jordan Love somebody else to throw the football to? Because Josh Jacobs has been great for him. Their defense has been consistent, well, somewhat consistent. It's really come down to, like, we're talking about 4 or 5 different wide receivers every single game, and I don't know who's going to be the top dog. So I think the narrative is going to be beyond Jordan Love, and it's going to be, can we finally put some type of elite receiver with our quarterback?
I think if he loses this weekend, I don't know if it's so much the narrative changes, but I wonder if he starts to become kind of underappreciated in terms of, I mean, you mentioned top 10-ish quarterback. You know who I think he could remind me of if he can't win this weekend, and I don't think he's going to? It would be Justin Herbert. Everybody kind of looks at Herbert and goes, yeah, he's good, but is he great? And then you go, well, he's the top 10 quarterback in the league. The reason you don't really associate him in that conversation, or you don't typically think of him firsthand, is because his teams don't win in the playoffs. And you look at what he did, he's always been a winning quarterback. He's been a guy that's now in the playoffs again. But you look at what he had previously, and he had the collapse against the Jacksonville Jaguars, if I remember correctly. But we looked at the coach and blamed the coach, and then you just kind of forget about him. When I watch Justin Herbert, I go, man, that guy's a really good quarterback, top 10 quarterback in the league. I get the same vibes from Jordan Love. I just think it goes underappreciated because we haven't seen him go on a run, and I don't expect that to happen this year either.
I could see something similar to what Dak Prescott went through. Dak was a really good quarterback early on in his career, and people were like, oh, Cowboys got something here. Like, this guy's really good. I'm going to be really fascinated to see what they're able to accomplish with him. And then over time, it flipped because people still view Dak as a good quarterback, but they're like, oh, that guy can't get it done when it matters the most. He never wins in the playoffs. Like, eventually you got to be able to do something in the postseason for me to label you as a top 10 quarterback in the league. I'll be curious. We're not there yet. But I do think we will start to get to the point where that narrative on Jordan Love flips. And it goes from exciting young talent to overpaid, can't win with him making that kind of money. That guy doesn't get it done in the postseason. It happens fast, dude. Think about how fast that happened for Lamar Jackson. It was a couple of years.
I don't think it's going to happen that fast, though. Like, I think
one more year of it, it happens.
Yeah, but not this season. I think even after this season, it's going to be one more year, and then that's when I think it kicks in. Because I can't blame Jordan Love. I think they've got the right coach and they've got the right quarterback. I also think that he's throwing to a ton of dudes that are never consistent. Like, he doesn't have a Terry McLaurin like Jaden Daniels does. Like, he's had Jalen Reed in and out of the lineup, Christian Watson in and out of the lineup, Dontarian Wicks out of the lineup. Like, he's never had one guy that you know is going to be there.
I'm totally with you. That's why I find Jordan Love to be so impressive, is that he has been this guy in a situation like what Patrick Mahomes has had at wide receiver over the last few seasons, where it's just kind of solid dudes. That's what Jordan Love's start of his career is. Typically, you need guys around you to elevate you early, and then you can elevate them as you figure out the NFL game.
Yeah, like if Jordan Love was in C.J. Stroud's shoes with all of those guys, and he was doing this, when they were healthy, because obviously they've been hurt, but when they were healthy and he was still underperforming, that's when I start to think, what's going on here?
All right, last thing that I wanted to get to. Speaking of one of those wide receivers, maybe he's going to be on the move this offseason. Apparently not, though. Tyreek Hill has reversed course, guys. Everything's fine in Miami.
Way to go, Tyreek.
Everything's fine. Why is everybody freaking out?
Yeah, he just said he was out. I was done with the interview.
He has now said he is not asking for a trade. He had a big clear the air moment, apparently, in his exit interview with Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer. They said it was unacceptable that he pulled himself out of the game, and that it will not be tolerated in the future. I can't believe that it was tolerated in the moment. That apparently Tyreek Hill said, I'm not playing in the fourth quarter.
They didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, well, he made it clear. He then posted a picture of himself superimposed on Antonio Brown's body when he was doing the peace sign after leaving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and disrobing on the field.
Chiseled.
He has since changed his Twitter profile picture, and he's back to Dolphins gear again.
Is he doing the peace sign still, though?
What do you guys make of this?
Basically, the Dolphins told him, like, hey, you're not out because you are owed this type of money, and we are not getting rid of you. So hope you enjoy Miami, Tyreek, because we'll see you in training camp.
Yeah, I think it was a conversation of, hey, look, first off, we can't trade you. It's really hard to trade you. So you can either play for the Dolphins or not play, your choice. But then also, hey, here's our direction. And look, part of Tyreek's frustration, what I don't understand is it was easy to look at the Dolphins and go, why were they not a playoff team? Because Tua got hurt and missed half the season.
He even said it in his thing with the media. It started with, look, we missed the playoffs because Tua was out. When you lose your QB1, you're not going to win.
Yeah, and I think you saw the wheels kind of turn during Tyreek's thing where he started with, hey, man, here's why we missed the playoffs. And then it was, man, I've never missed the playoffs before. Man, I bet I could get to the playoffs with another team. And then, that filter didn't hit right away, and then he said it. And I don't think he regretted saying it until he had his meeting with Mike McDaniel.
T-Bone, you don't have these moments because you're not married. But one day, you will have this moment. And Alex, I know you've been here before, where you get into the middle of something and you and your wife are discussing, and then suddenly it becomes an argument. And you're not totally sure how it became an argument. And you weren't mad at the beginning. And then they say something, you're like, wait, why am I getting blamed for this? Yeah. And then you start saying stuff. And then by the end, you're the one that's actually more upset than your wife is. And you say some stuff that you don't mean and that you wish never got out there. And you're like, 5 minutes later, you think to yourself, bleep.
Yeah.
Why'd I do that?
Yeah, and I typically try
that was Tyreek Hill.
I typically try the Tyreek Hill route with my wife when those arguments take place. I look at her and I just chuckle and I say, I'm out, dog. And then I just kind of sidestep out of the room.
And then you had the meeting the next day.
And then she finds me and is like, you're sleeping on the couch tonight. And I'm like, cool. Appreciate that.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone here to tell you about Pick 6 from DraftKings. As the NFL playoffs are starting this weekend, and as the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Pick 6 is available in most states, including here in Missouri, and you play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like touchdowns, yardage, sacks, and more. And DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code 101WXOS. That's code 101WXOS for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus award is now withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limit time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Three 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Let's start out with this one, Alex. I think it's a good one. Makes you think. From the 314.
I hate you.
Do you think the injury to Binnington that happened to the 2022 playoffs was the beginning of his demise? Did it change his goaltending for the worse? He hasn't been the same since then. Alex, it really makes you think.
Okay. It does. It makes you think. And then once you initially think...
Wait, I'm still thinking.
I'm really trying to do this as like a not Tony.
Good luck.
Okay. Once you think about it and you say, I'm going to look at the stats.
Oh, that was it right there.
Was it? Damn it. I was trying not to. And then you go to moneypuck.com. Now, I won't deny the 22-23 season was not very pretty. I think he had like a minus .02 goal saved above expected. That wasn't good. But I don't know if you remember and watched the games that season, BK. That was Tony. Damn it. There was a lot of bad backdoor tap-ins that took place. But then go to last season on moneypuck.com. Goals saved above expected. Connor Hellebuck, number 1. Thatcher Demko, number 2.
Those guys are good.
Anthony Stolarz, which only played 27 games. So count him out. Jeremy Swayman, 3. Jordan Binnington, 4.
That's pretty good.
Maybe he was just healed up by then. But no, to take the tone out of this, I think what took place was the team got a lot worse the following season from that postseason when he got injured against the Colorado Avalanche, and he wasn't able to recover when the team was just leaving backdoor tap-ins left and right. And then you saw the team improve a little bit better defensively. He was awesome, and right now you're still kind of in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think Bennington's gone through a slump. I think that's what this is.
Yeah.
And he had a couple of games where you saw it. It was like, okay, that's the Bennington. One of those was in the Winter Classic, which is the exact type of moment that I would expect Bennington to be able to snap out of that kind of a sluggish streak. And last night, unfortunately, it went back to it. It also was a weird game. You had the goal that could have been, some would argue, was a goalie interference, and then another one where he's got a 3-on-1. Like, good luck. Yeah, that's 2 of the 5. Now, I would say the Middleton goal, you got to be able to save that one. There were a couple of bad ones, but that happens sometimes. So I'm not going to make too much of this. They need better goaltending. It has to get fixed if they're going to be a playoff.
He makes that stop against Middleton. It's a tie hockey game. And frankly, if Tyler Tucker's shot that doesn't hit the post go in, it's a tie game, you probably get to overtime and win it. And I don't think anybody's talking about the goalie because you found a way to win.
All right, let's continue here. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Guys, if you had to guess, who do you think will be the best player that is traded at the NHL's deadline this year?
One of Elias Pettersson or JT Miller.
You think they do it?
Yeah. And honestly, I think they're going to trade Pettersson. Pettersson's no move kicks in July 1st. JT Miller already has a no move. JT Miller has made it very clear he likes Vancouver and wants to stay in Vancouver. So what do? Those two guys can't play together. For whatever reason, this team has taken a massive blow because those two guys struggle on the same team. Got to move one of them. I, in no way, shape, or form, would be moving a 26-year-old 100-point player for a 31-year-old player who does not put up those types of points. But I think it's going to be Pettersson, and I think people are going to hate what I'm about to say. Hope you enjoy him wearing a Vegas Golden Knights jersey.
That makes sense.
Stone going to get hurt again?
Yep. Stone will get hurt. They'll probably trade one of their NHL forwards that can go to the Vancouver Canucks, but we'll get to this a little bit later. If I'm the Blues, I at least look into this. If the 26-year-old center is available, absolutely.
I don't think they end up doing it. I think they ultimately come to the conclusion of, what are we doing? This is a 26-year-old center with 100 points in his history. Like, why are we going to trade that guy?
What else do you do, though?
They come to terms with the fact that they're still in a playoff spot right now, despite the fact that they've had a terrible season. Their goalie was hurt for an extended period of time. JT Miller stepped away for personal reasons. Dakota Joshua had a great season last year for them. Missed time because of testicular cancer. Like, let's all calm down for a minute.
You know what this sounds
January.
like? Firing the coach and getting the new coach bump.
Well, Rick Tocchet is a free agent at the end of this season as
So he's
well.
gonna get
He
fired.
might be leaving next year.
He's a goner.
I think Vancouver just needs to take a deep breath and just relax for a minute. They need Colton Parayko to come in and say, everybody relax.
Everybody relax. That's what a common sense thing would think of.
Yeah, I
Vancouver's not
going
to do that.
Is it?
Just stop. Stop with this. You have a 26-year-old center. Think about what Alex just said. Who scored 100 points and is one of the best players in the league, and he decided to re-sign with you, and you have him for, the next 7 years at this point?
Yeah, 2032.
You build around that guy. That's your franchise center point, and now we build from there. If that means trading JT Miller, so be it. JT Miller's a really good player, but if he's the guy that you have to move, that's what you do. So I don't think they will end up deciding to trade Pettersson. I think the best guy that will be dealt will be Provorov at the deadline this year. I think he'll be the one that ends up getting moved. Big defenseman, classic guy that ends up getting moved at the deadline.
I could see that. It is wild because I feel like we see this with multiple teams throughout an NHL season, and it's not like it's early anymore. We're at the halfway point for most teams. But I feel like you see teams panic in the NHL a lot quicker than in any sport. Like, remember, the Rangers ended up being right, but the Rangers ended up panicking earlier this year, and all the reports come out, hey, we've got to move all these different pieces. Truba's on the market. Got the Canucks doing that.
I think some of that, though, sorry to interrupt, I think some of that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was like, hey, we're struggling.
Panic.
We're all in panic mode. We're going to trade everybody out. And then all the guys in the locker room are looking around like, am I the next one going? I think that does affect performance sometimes. At the time, they were like in a playoff spot. And since then, they have cratered.
And some of that, too, is Chris True just mismanaging his team.
Sure.
I mean, it goes all the way back to the Barclay Goodrow where they forced him out and everybody loved him.
But I do find it interesting in the NHL that it feels like the one sport where I see panic set in than any other sport. I saw Mo look at that 2023 baseball season and not panic until like the trade deadline. And we kept saying like, "Hey, this is a squad that you should be panicking about." And Mo kept saying, "Hey, no, we're good. We're be patient. Be patient. It's going to be fine." Meanwhile, in the NHL, they're like, "Oh my God, we got to trade a 100-point center because we can't figure this out right now while we're in a playoff spot."
I think that's so stupid, too, that if they decide to go that route, I'm totally with you there. But if I'm honest with it, I think if you're Vancouver, it's realizing, like, we might only have about a year or two of this window. Brock Besser's a free agent. You're probably going to lose him. You've got Thatcher Demko coming up in a couple of years. You just signed Quinn Hughes, but he's got a contract extension in 2 years. Like, cap situation is going to probably hurt your team in a couple of years. So you're probably thinking, we need to strike while the iron's hot.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. In 15 minutes, we'll play a game of More Likely to Happen. You guys give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on 101 ESPN. But next, yesterday we talked a lot about how the Cardinals' plans with Nolan Arenado affect all of their opportunities to play the young guys. One of those situations that could alleviate the problem is what they do in center field. They could play Lars Nootbaar there. They don't seem to want to do that. So what's the plan, and how do they stack up against the rest of the National League in center field? Talk about that next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. So, Alex, MLB Network is putting together their top 10 at each position right now. And yesterday, they did their center field rankings. Number 1 in Major League Baseball, according to MLB Network, Julio Rodriguez. Makes sense. The guy is a superstar. I'm not sure his production last year would necessarily represent that, but we can go with more of a track record than just one season. Julio Rodriguez is very good. Number 2 was Jackson Merrill. Number 3, Byron Buxton. Number 4, Michael Harris II. Okay, now I'm starting to get the hint. It's not a very good position right now in the league. Buxton is hurt all the time. Michael Harris II did not have a great season by his own standards and was hurt a lot last season. Mike Trout is number 5 on this list, and I'm not sure he played, 50 games last year? And was it to his normal standards when he did? Brandon Marsh, 6. Dalton Varsho is 7. Garrett Mitchell, who's a good player, is 8. O'Neal Cruz, who just moved to the position, is 9.
That was the one when I saw that. I was like, okay, center field is much weaker than it used to be because O'Neal Cruz, 22 total games in center field.
And Luis Robert Jr. is at number 10 on this list, and the guy never plays baseball. Like, he is the Ben Simmons of Major League Baseball. When he plays, it looks good out there, but it's just never an option for him to be out on the field. So I wanted to use this as the backdrop, Alex, to our conversation about what the Cardinals could or should do in center field this upcoming season. Because yesterday we talked about Arenado and how important it is to get his 500 plate appearances off of the books, because you just need those opportunities for the other guys to play. One way you could alleviate that crunch is by moving Nootbaar basically full-time to center field. But that means not getting opportunities for Victor Scott and not getting opportunities for Michael Ciani in center field. Some people would say, who cares? The Cardinals, I believe, would say, that's a problem, because we don't believe in Lars Nootbaar as a defender in center field. And when you look across Major League Baseball right now, it's pretty clear teams are valuing the defense they're getting in center over the offense, because, man, there ain't very many good offensive players right now in the center field spot.
If I could be honest, too, I don't even think Victor Scott's a factor in this season for the team in center field anyway. Possible. I think he's in Memphis already. So really, we're talking about Michael Ciani, who maybe it's just me. I don't really care about the development of Michael Ciani. I think if Dalton Varsho was, 8 on that list, I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of Dalton Varsho with the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't know how great he is defensively.
He's very good.
But the offense isn't great. And I know that Lars Nootbaar's defense is good. Can it be great? Well, I don't know. I haven't seen it in center field. But why wouldn't I give that a shot over Michael Ciani, who I know his bat isn't going to be doing anything for you?
So that's the thing that I find to be so interesting about, like, the current landscape in center field across the league. There are so few good players at the position that the bar to clear is incredibly low. Like, if the Cardinals just put Lars Nootbaar in center field full-time, and he does not take a step, he's simply the same exact hitter that he has been for the majority of his career, he'd be one of the best everyday hitters in center fields in the entire league. That is not an opinion. That's just by the metrics. But I don't know how he would be defensively. And that's where things get interesting to me, is like, you said you don't think that we're going to see any Victor Scott next season. I don't know, man. I don't know. And the reason why is because if he can translate the bat, huge if. We did not see it at all last year. But if the bat starts to translate to the major league level, he takes his walks, he gets on base, and suddenly he's able to steal bases for you. Dude, he could be on this list next year. Like, next season, we could be looking at the top 10 center fielders in Major League Baseball right now, and one of those names could be Victor Scott II. That's the kind of upside he has. I would also say, though, like, Nootbaar could be on that list too, if he's just simply capable at the position.
And that's kind of where I fall with this. Like, I don't think you even see Victor Scott, because if it's Victor Scott or Michael Ciani for the Cardinals, they're going to play Michael Ciani, and Victor Scott's going to be the extra guy. And if he's the extra guy, I don't think it makes much sense to have him as the 5th outfielder or 4th outfielder on your bench. You want him starting every single day so the bat can continue to play. But wasn't the whole purpose of this season to try and figure out what you've got and what's more important for the future of the Cardinals? Michael Ciani as a center fielder defensively, or Lars Nootbaar, whose bat continues to play, but maybe you find out that he can be a very good center fielder for you?
I think that's part of the conversation that's worth having is, okay, this year is about finding out what you have in the young players. Can't some of that be finding out if Lars Nootbaar can be a center fielder? He did it for Japan. Looks fine there. Now, that's not a full 162-game season, and over time, defenders will get exposed at their positions if they're not capable of playing it full time. So that's something worth keeping in mind. But isn't part of the conversation about them moving Nolan Gorman back to third base to find out if he's capable of being a full-time third baseman defensively? Isn't part of moving Gorman over to second base or over to third to give the opportunity to Donovan to be an everyday second baseman? Isn't part of, I know he's not a young player, but part of moving Contreras to first base is to find out if Ivan Herrera can capably play regularly behind the plate.
Aren't you doing that with Burleson? You did it last year in the outfield, and aren't you doing it at first base?
So why not also try that with Newton center, would be my question. Is if you don't see Scott as being ready, which was your starting point, Alex, and we know for the most part what Siani is with his bat. He's just never been a good hitter. In the minor leagues, in the major leagues, there's nothing in his profile that would suggest, could be wrong here, but nothing in his profile that would suggest this guy's going to be a capable major league hitter. There's everything in Lars Nootbaar's history to suggest that that can be the case. The question for him is, can he stay healthy? I think it's worth finding out. That would be something that I would be exploring in spring training, is saying, hey, Newt, get your body right, because we're going to try you in center field going into the season if Arenado is back on the team. That would be the one. Yesterday I said the number one priority for the Cardinals this offseason needs to be trading Nolan Arenado, because you cannot have him on the roster and still find a way to make this work with everybody else. The one caveat to that, now that we've explored it a little bit more, is Lars Nootbaar playing in center field. It opens up, it unlocks the roster in a way where you can still find out what a lot of these other young guys can do.
And just to kind of play, I guess, Ollie's role here, because we know how much Ollie values defense in center field. My whole pushback on that would be, you don't necessarily need to do what we talked about with Jordan Walker, right? Of, hey, why do the Cardinals keep pulling him out of games late in the season when they're out of it? Well, they want him to earn it. Or, we kept arguing, hey, he should be getting 9 innings. I don't necessarily care if Lars got 9 innings in center field, because maybe he's not that. But it opens things up, to your point. But if it gets late in the game, and Ollie's job will be both development and winning baseball games, and we've talked about it, that's a tough spot to be in as a manager. Well, you know what? I can get away with 6 or 7 innings of Nootbaar in center, because that's 3 at-bats for him, potentially, 2 to 3 at-bats for him, 2 to 3 at-bats for whoever it is in left, Donovan or Burleson, depending on what you're doing that day, along with Gorman at second and then Arenado at third. And then, you know what? If we're winning and we want to win that baseball game, which they'll be trying to do, boom, Siani still has a role on the team. It's not like you just magic throw down some dust and he's gone. No, Siani's path as a big leaguer probably in the future is as a elite defensive replacement that comes into games. So you pull Nootbaar over to left then at that point in the baseball game. Siani goes out into center field. You've gotten at bats. You're starting to learn more answers. You are finding out if Nootbaar can play center field overall by getting him 6 or 7 innings. And then to help win the ball game, boom, now you go back to that defensive replacement.
And honestly, that's the perfect way for me to manage this team this year. Like, I look at this and I say, all right, well, I've got my group that is going to start the game for me. Every single position. You've got Donovan, you've got Nootbaar, you've got Walker in the outfield. If Arenado is here, Gorman's at second base, Herrera's behind the plate, Contreras is at first, Burleson's DH. All of my players that I'm trying to figure out, they're getting everyday at-bats. And then when my team takes the lead, or when the offense clicks, now I can start putting defensive replacements in so that I can win the game. That's what we've talked so much about, having the utility guys, the versatile guys. What I would hate is this team look at it and say, well, we got to win, and we got to win with defense. So let's start Siani in center field, Pages in catcher, and then we've got these bats we'll sprinkle in throughout the game.
So somebody on the text line, and it's a fair question from the 636. I really, really, really don't understand why people are still so high on Lars Nootbaar. It just doesn't make sense to me. Here's why, especially as it pertains to this center field conversation. Here's the entire list of players that have spent a decent amount of time in center field over the last 3 seasons that have a higher OPS plus in that stretch than Lars Nootbaar. This is the entirety of that list. Aaron Judge, Julio Rodriguez, Byron Buxton, Brandon Nimmo, who just got $100 million, Corbin Carroll, who won NL Rookie of the Year last year, and Riley Green. End of list. It's 6 players long. Lars Nootbaar is not a superstar, and I think this is where the pushback comes from Cardinals fans, understandably so. He was sold as a star, and he's not that. Lars Nootbaar is simply a really good baseball player. He doesn't stay healthy enough. He needs to figure that out. It's something that John Mozeliak talked about on Sunday. He said, hey, I think he still said, I think he's got star potential. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think he can be a really good player for a contending team, kind of similar to what Brandon Nimmo has fit in with the New York Mets as. Like, when Lars Nootbaar hits free agency, if he starts to stay healthy a little bit more, he's going to get $100 million. It probably won't be here, and I'm sure Cardinals fans will not want him to get that here, But because he's a good defender, he runs the bases well, he's athletic, he hits the ball incredibly hard, and he's got production to show for it. That's the kind of profile that teams typically bet on, especially analytically minded teams. Like the Detroit Tigers, for example. I could totally see Lars Nootbaar being the type of player that they would go after. The Houston Astros, he's exactly the type of player that they would go after typically. That's why people remain high on him. I understand why people are down a bit because the expectations got so out of whack for what Lars Nootbaar should have always been expected to be. This was a no-name prospect that came up and hit his way into the big leagues and then went over to Japan and had an unbelievable World Baseball Classic. Like, the story is pretty awesome when you really think about it. But, yeah, it's been a little underwhelming relative to the star expectations, but the production's been pretty good, man. You just got to stay healthy. Yeah. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
And honestly, I would like to try that in center field. You obviously have seen his inability to stay healthy in the corner spots when you're using him, and some of these injuries have happened on the offensive side of things. But the whole point of this season is figuring out roles and how they fit on this team's future. And one of the biggest questions is, what's center field going to be? Well, the hope is Victor Scott. Do any of us in this room believe that Victor Scott is going to be the starting center fielder for the Cardinals this upcoming season?
I think after July, maybe. Yeah.
I could see
but at the beginning of the season,
I could see a scenario where he can win.
I think if he has a good spring training, I actually.
I mean, here's his numbers. Sorry to cut you off, BK, because I looked up his numbers post when he got recalled again. Basically August until the end of the season. And look, he wasn't an everyday starter. Really only had a stretch where Siani was on the IL. But I mean, if he puts up these kind of numbers, it will be something you could live with. 244 batting average, 278 on base, 384 slug, a 662 OPS. And we talked about Varsho. Varsho was at like a 700 OPS. Yeah. And with his speed average and his defense, though it will be a below average OPS plus, it is something that you can live with as potentially being a future center fielder.
And maybe my pessimism is just starting early for the Cardinals. But I view this as the Cardinals are going to say, well, he's still young. We've got Michael Siani. We're not going to play Victor Scott. And if that's the case, it comes down to Nootbaar or Siani. And if Arenado's not here, none of this is a conversation piece. It's all fixed for you. But if he is, which I'm expecting him to be, it makes the most sense for this Cardinals team to figure out what's best for the rest of your roster by playing Lars Nootbaar in a position that you can figure out who he is. And guess what? If it doesn't work by June, then you take him out of it and you say, nope, we tried it, didn't work. Now we'll put Victor Scott and we'll figure out what to do next.
So somebody on the text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, makes a point that I think we've kind of talked around a decent amount, but haven't necessarily addressed directly. From the 618. Stop it, guys. OPS is the worst stat for a guy like Lars Nootbaar because of his walk rate. Walks don't hurt, slug hurts, and the walk rate increases his OPS. That's normally okay, but Lars is such an outlier on his walk rate. He's in the same company as Juan Soto, but he doesn't have the kind of power that makes it actually do damage the way that Juan Soto does. A fair point in some ways, where I would push back a bit. The walk rate does matter if he's your leadoff hitter. When he's the guy that's setting the table for your middle of the order, it's actually a pretty good place to construct your roster. The thing that is difficult for the Cardinals is that they have two of those guys, with Newt and Donovan. And so anytime you put one of them closer to the middle of the order, that walk rate, while still valuable, getting on base matters, guys. It means they don't get outs. But when you're doing that for guys towards the bottom of your order, well, it means less because those guys are less likely to drive you in. And when you have both of them at the top of your order, now you have less ability to do damage from that middle of the order. So I think it's more a roster construction potential issue if neither of those guys that we just mentioned, Donovan or Newt, develop more power. I think if you had one of them on the roster, we'd really like the way that they play at the top of the order. The problem is they've got two of them. And it's a good problem, technically, because you've got two good players. But that's kind of the way that I would view that issue, so to speak, is one of them has to develop more power. Otherwise, it is going to be eventually, I think the Cardinals will have to choose one or the other.
Yeah, that's where I am. I think when you look at them, it is more about that. They put them in the 5 spot. And that's your point. That's what we've always talked about with Donovan Newport. I don't think they're going to develop more power. I think you have to quit judging it on 2, 3, 4 as the middle of the order. And if you have those two guys, they need to be 1, 2, and then the middle of the order is quote unquote 3, 4, 5. And that's where I think there's been the issue.
The other thing that's Donovan is a little different because of his average is up so high. Like Donovan hits 280. Nootbaar, his walk rate is everything because he hits 240 for the season, so he has to get on base at a really high clip to make up for the lack of power and the lack of average. So Nootbaar, I think Nootbaar should be your leadoff hitter next year. And you should go into opening day, and that guy is expected to be at the top of your order because Donovan at least can profile as a 5-hitter because he hits 280. So you're potentially having that guy that can kind of clean things up for you, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Coming up next, let's get into more likely to happen. You give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us two scenarios. We will tell you which one is more likely. Let's start out with this, Alex. We have two underdogs this week of exactly 3 points. The Commanders on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Houston Texans at home are a 3-point underdog against the Chargers. So Texans against the Chargers, Commanders against the Bucs. More likely to pull off the upset this weekend at Wild Card Weekend. The Commanders against Tampa or the Houston Texans at home against LA.
Oh, man, I think both are going to win, but I'll say more
You
like
think the Texans are going to win?
I'm sorry. I flipped those in my head.
To pull off the upset.
I flipped those in my head. Okay, it's the Commanders. Because for some reason I thought I heard you say the Chargers. Wasn't listening. It's the Commanders. Texans don't have a chance. I'm so out on the Texans. They have not looked like a consistent offense all season. I legitimately think Jaden Daniels could put a whooping on Baker Mayfield. Frankly, I'm a little surprised that they're the underdog in that game.
Yeah, I would go more likely Commanders win. I don't believe the Texans are going to be able to beat the Chargers. They've just been trending in the wrong direction all season long. I think the game ends up being competitive. I don't think the Chargers will blow them out because we've seen where we look at a team that is the wild card that has to go on the road, and the games are always tight. But I do think the Commanders will win. I don't trust the Bucs. I think Commanders win that game.
I think that Commanders-Bucs game has the potential to be really fun. That Sunday slate, man. Packers-Eagles and then Commanders-Bucs. Some really good games. I see no chance that the Texans win. I'm totally with you, Alex. This team has been saying 1-2-3 Cancun for 6 weeks. And now they're going up against Jim Harbaugh's tough-as-nails team in L.A. Now, just like the human aspect of it, there's a lot going on right now in L.A. And this is something that I don't know how you quantify it going into this game, but, like, there will be players, I have to imagine, that are wondering, like, how's stuff looking at home as they're preparing for this game this week? And I don't mean to bring this into the football side of things, but, like, how do you not? That is one part of this game that I don't really know how to handle. But if it was simply your typical week leading up to it, I would be picking the Chargers -3 as one of my most confident picks that I've had all season long. I'm actually surprised it's only 3. I think that my number will probably go up to 3.5. I like the Commanders. I like the Commanders straight up in this game. Alex, what do you got?
Guys, more likely to happen, the Blues make a big trade before the start of next season, or the Blues draft in the top 10?
I think the big trade. I'll say it's more likely they make a big trade. Top 10 feels aggressive. If you said they pick in the lottery, and I guess it's possible they move up based on the lottery, but
yeah, because the lottery always works in your favor.
Could they pick like 13th, 15th?
Right now, I think they're 14th.
Yeah,
but
that
the difference
feels about
between
right.
14th and top 10 is 2 points.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to go that low. So I'll say more likely they make a big trade. I could see them doing something this
How about
offseason.
this one? The difference between 7th overall and 14th is 3 points.
Yeah.
Oh, and
The bottom of the West is the bottom of the NHL is just a
It's not very good.
muddy mess.
I would say more likely they make a big trade. I don't think, though I am the one that is the most negative on this year's Blues team on this show, I don't think they're a top 10 bad team. Now, maybe they end up winning a lottery and moving up a couple spots to be case point, but I don't think they're that bad. Yeah. I think they're right in the muddy middle. They clearly feel like they are playoff caliber team or in playoff push mode to a certain extent, to where, like, if they've been pushing this season, I don't know why that would change in the offseason. So I would say, yeah, more likely they swing a big trade.
I'm with you guys as well in the big trade, man. I mean, we've already talked like the Mitch Marners, and now you got one of these two Vancouver guys, but some of these teams are going to be looking to make an NHL move if they underperform. We've already talked plenty about the Ottawa Senators. Pittsburgh's going to be in that conversation. The New York Rangers, the Buffalo Sabres. There's going to be a lot of teams that could be willing to deal a star off of their roster, and that's where you see those big NHL trades, and that's where I think the offseason the Blues pounce.
Guys, we talked a little bit, I believe it was yesterday, about the Cardinals pitching being potentially going to be better than we're expecting. More likely to happen, the Cardinals end up with a top 10 pitching staff this season or a top 10 offense?
I'll say top 10 pitching staff.
I think that's where I would
I think they got the talent there. I don't think they have the talent on the offensive side yet.
I think there's just too many really good offense. Man, there's some really good pitching staffs that have been assembled this year, too. I'll go top 10 pitching staff just because there's going to be injuries around the league. And that's going to hinder some of these teams that I currently view as being like, oh, wow, look at their rotation. How could they not be a top 10 rotation? And then you look back at the end of the season, it's like, oh, because their top 2 starters missed 12 starts apiece. So I just think there's more outs for them with the rotation, their pitching staff side of things. Also go top 10 pitching.
I can't believe nobody said offense, because that's where I would go.
Really?
I think the ceiling on the Cardinals' offense is higher than the ceiling on the pitching staff. I think the ceiling on the pitching staff is carried by the bullpen. Because I look at most of those other guys like Palante, McGreevy, Fetty, Michaelis, as we talked about yesterday. They don't carry a ton of swing and miss. So I think their ERAs and what we're judging it on can really fluctuate in a season, especially if you're going with like Nootbaar in center field where the defense could take a step back. Not all these pieces are going to hit, but if you get a healthy season out, Nootbaar, Walker finally takes that step, Gorman finally hits his potential on top of a Contreras doing his thing, Wynn staying consistent, I can see how all of a sudden Donovan being himself, I can see all of a sudden where you look at that offense and go, man, this thing is pretty good. Top 10 is going to be tough to get to. Like, I think neither one of these is likely to happen, but I think the ceiling for the offense is higher than the pitching staff.
If that happens, this team's a playoff team. And probably winning the NL Central. Yeah. And that's why I'm very skeptical that it happens.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for more likely to happen. You guys give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. Start out with this one from the 636. Guys, more likely to happen. The Blues trade, their Blues big trade that they make is for Brady Tkachuk or Mitch Marner.
I don't think you're trading for Mitch Marner. I know I've thrown him out here, but like you trade for him so you get his rights. And right now, I mean, he's got a 100-point season. They're seeing a different Mitch Marner now. I'm very intrigued to see what that team does because they don't have the cap to make it all work. But I'll say it's Brady Tkachuk. I mean, if Ottawa misses the playoffs, I had Julian McKenzie on who covers the Senators for The Athletic on my pregame show the other night, and he even said, he's like, the Tkachuk thing's not going to go away. If this team misses the playoffs, Tkachuk is not going to want to stick around, and they're probably going to want out. Because he's going to want to win, just like his brother did. So, I mean, if you're a Blues fan and you hope that happens, you need Ottawa to miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I would lean towards Tkachuk. I think when you saw what happened when he missed out on his brother, and I don't know if he's as good as his brother, but he's right. He's
up there.
Up there.
Yeah.
I could see where you make that acquisition. He wants out. Now you get a team where the Ottawa Senators are kind of hamstrung with what they can do. Marner's a free agent. That I don't know if the Blues would sign him and give him the contract he wants.
So I just randomly, I think it's Brady Tkachuk. I agree with you guys. I was looking up because I was curious. It feels rare that a 10-win wild card team would be a 3-point underdog at home, right? That feels like a rarity to me. So I was curious. Okay, when was the last time that we saw something like this in the wild card round? It was 2021 when the Titans with Mike Vrabel were at home against the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. They ended up as a 3-point underdog in that game. They did lose that game outright. Back in 2016, the Teddy Bridgewater-led Minnesota Vikings took on Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks and were a 3-point underdog at home. They ended up losing the game outright. And then finally, the other one in the last decade, one other time that this has happened, was Cincinnati made it to the playoffs. This was when they had A.J. McCarron as their starting quarterback in that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They lost that game at home as well. They did cover the spread, though. The Steelers ended up winning that game by 2 points. So it's happened 3 times in the wild card round in the last decade, and in all 3 times, that team that was the underdog at home did end up losing. So this is a situation where typically you can trust the favorite.
We're down memory lane, so I have to ask the question. Wasn't that Minnesota game the one where the kicker missed like a 12-yard chip shot in the freezing cold?
Ooh,
because remember they had a period where they played outdoors after their roof caved in. I think that might have been that game.
Yeah, Blair Walsh, no good.
Attaboy Blair.
No good.
Yeah, from like 20 yards. Chip shot.
Yeah, it was a 25-yard field goal. Yeah. They were at the 9-yard line.
Brutal.
Yikes. So they almost won, but they did not end up winning that game. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. You guys can check us out on YouTube as well. The Graveyard Chat is very lively today at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. Coming up next, Alex, the Blues just can't have nights like that out of their top line. We'll talk about whether or not it's time to juggle the lines back up next year on 101 ESPN.
Taylor Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues fell to the Wild last night. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they host the Anaheim Ducks. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale, and then puck drop at 7 with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. This Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See Milano.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, they just can't have another game like that. The Blues can't from their top line. This is a team that, when they've been at their best under Jim Montgomery, it's because Thomas and Kyrou and Buchnevich and honestly, Dylan Holloway has worked himself into this mix for me as well. Parayko, Broberg, those guys have been amazing. And then you can look at the goaltending as well. At their best, they've had really good goaltending. The top players look like they're top players. It's very simple, and that's the way they've become a better team under Monty. Last night wasn't one of those games. Last night, your top line just flat out got outplayed. You look at what they did when the Thomas line was on the ice for them yesterday, and they got outchanced in those situations. They put a bunch of shots out there, but they didn't really put many of them on goal. Half of their actual shot attempts ended up going on goal. They gave up more offense than they produced themselves. It's not a panic thing for me. Robert Thomas has been really good under Jim Montgomery. I think he's been pretty damn good since he came back from his injury, honestly. But last night was a wake-up call, and that group has to be better. Do you think they should switch things up? Like, is this a time where you juggle up the lines, or do you keep it as is and you just say, okay, they're going to be better in the next
You have to juggle up the lines. I mean, look, Robert Thomas didn't have a great game. He would tell you that. I think he fell into the same conversation of what you said with Jordan Kyrou at the end of the game, where you were just too soft on pucks and you got pushed off of them and you made bad turnovers. It's no coincidence that in the last 4 losses for the Blues, those are the only 4 times that Robert Thomas has been a minus. So the loss to Buffalo, he was a -1. The loss to Florida, he was a -1. The loss to Columbus, he was a -1. Minnesota was a -4. All of the other games they won, and he was a plus in those games. So, like, Robert Thomas is your best player, and you have to be the shutdown line and the productive line, which seems unfair to say, but welcome to being a star in the NHL. And I didn't like Saad on that top line. Like, Saad played really well in that game against the Ottawa Senators, and it was fun to see him get his offense going. But that has been Brandon Saad. You're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. You can't have an up and down type of player with Robert Thomas. And frankly, Pavel Buchnevich, he's got the points, but both ends of the ice have been affected a little bit by Pavel Buchnevich. And I know I'm kind of reactionary to one game, but the losses, that's what's taken place. I would put Dylan Holloway up there with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. He has been one of your best players. He's effective defensively. He's generating offense. But when you do that, Brandon, what happens is the trickle-down effect. Now you lose 2 effective scoring lines, because now what's going to happen is who's playing on that second line. I would say you put a Jake Neighbors there, which pushes that Brandon Saad down with Bolduc and Sundqvist. And now, to me, I've lost that third line of Sundqvist, Saad, and Bolduc. And now you got 2 lines that you got to score with. And now you're back to the same problem before. You're just at a personnel problem right now. And frankly, you don't have the guys that are stepping up when you need them to. But after that game, I would expect Jim Montgomery to have a different top line, because you can't throw Brandon Saad back out there for a performance like that, as well as Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich.
Can Matthew Joseph get a chance? I know they don't like him. I don't totally understand why.
So the way that Jim Montgomery spoke about him, because JR asked that same question of how Matthew Joseph can stay in the lineup, and the way Jim Montgomery said was he's got to play the same way that Nathan Walker and Toropchenko play, in terms of being relentless on the puck. Every single shift, you know what you're getting. And I mean, I would say he's gotten a chance, and he hasn't backed it up. The Ottawa game, he was good, but 10 minutes against Columbus and was a -2. Nashville was the other game that he played. It's short sample size. It's unfair, but I don't think I'm playing him in my top 6.
No, I agree. I would have him on that third line.
Yeah. I mean,
I'll give him a shot.
Over Saad?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. But the thing is, Matthew Joseph doesn't really provide offense for you. And Brandon Saad, at least the perks of Brandon Saad, is to provide offense. Now, what I would do...
Hasn't he been playing center a decent amount when they've had him in these opportunities?
Yeah, when Sundqvist was out.
Get him on the wing.
What I would do...
Center, man.
Another guy where we're doing this.
What I would do is, and this sounds kind of brutal, but I would scratch Brandon Saad again, and I would put Texier on that third line and Joseph to the fourth line. Now, Foxa coming back makes things interesting because somebody's got to come out of the lineup when Foxa returns.
Yeah, just bump. I would bump Texier out personally.
I mean, I think Texier.
Put Sonny on the wing, boom, we're good to go.
I think Texier actually provides a little bit more than Brandon Saad in terms of how he plays without the puck. Like Brandon Saad last night, I mean, he was with that -10 of the top line. At least Alex Texier in his last 4 games, he's a +4, and he's got a goal and an assist, and he's playing fourth-line minutes. 9 minutes, 13 minutes, 12, 11. I'd accelerate his opportunity. I think there's a reason
he's playing those minutes, though.
Probably.
And I think when Brandon Saad goes up to that top line, he stays there for a full game. When Texier goes up to that top line, he's gone by the end of the first period.
But I'm saying you put him on the third line. Like, if you're going to do this in these last 4 games, I'll give you an extra minute, 90 seconds on my third pair or my third line, and now I at least have a little bit more offense on that one.
My point, though, is I think Saad can do more with those minutes than what Texier does with those minutes.
Man, I don't know. I think
Saad is overexposed as a top-line player at this point in his career. And I think, honestly, he's probably overexposed as a second-line player. I think they're asking more of him than what he's capable of giving. And if you put him on that third line, like I would just like to see Matthew Joseph get those opportunities, but whatever. If we're saying set him aside for a minute, I would rather see Saad than Texier. And you asked, what do you do with when Foxa comes back? Well, Foxa becomes my third line center, and then it's Saad and Joseph, and that's my third line. And then my fourth line, I'm bumping Sonny down into that spot as the center, and then I move over.
So you're taking Bolduc out?
No. Oh, yeah, I guess.
I mean, would Brandon Saad's not scoring goals, Brandon Saad is not. He's invisible on the ice.
You're right, but I think Texier would say the same thing. This team just right now, like, the truth is what we're saying without actually saying it. This team's 2 guys short. And we know who those 2 players are. Like, for the future, it's going to be Snuggerud and Dvorsky. They built this team in a way where, like, if those guys get dropped into the lineup, if they are ready to go, looks pretty damn good, not only for right now, but for the future. Unfortunately, they're not ready right now.
Yeah.
And so I do think they're going to have 2 different things. One of 2 things happen. One, Army's going to have to make a move earlier than what he wants to make it to be able to bolster this lineup, so that way they can avoid the conversation that we're talking about right now, because you probably do need to make those your top 6 guys. Holloway, Thomas, Booch, Kyrou, Shin, Neighbors. So those are your 6 best players.
Yeah. And then my third line for the game tomorrow would be Texier, Sundqvist, and Bolduc.
Sure.
And then my fourth line.
But those guys aren't capable of...
No, they're not.
They need to be a top-heavy lineup right now.
They're not qualified to be third-line players on a contender.
Which goes back to what we just said. Your best players can't have a game like you just had last night.
And if you want to be a consistent contending type of a team, you either need those third-line guys, whoever it ends up being on any given night, to step up in a meaningful way, or the top-line players have to be awesome every single night, which is a huge burden to place on them, and an unfair one, frankly. Or Army's got to go out there and make an early move. Or they're not going to be a contender this year. They're going to end up missing the playoffs, which goes against all of their stated goals, and you just continue waiting for Snuggerud and Dvorsky. Those are really... the spots.
Well, and honestly, right now is the opportunity for you to be a top-heavy team, because you're taking on these lesser teams compared to, and look, some people might say, well, you're a lesser team right now, and I can't really argue that for how you've played inconsistently. But against Anaheim, against Calgary, against Columbus, you should be able to do what I mentioned of a Texier, Sundqvist, and Bolduc, and that line should be able to get a advantage at some point in the game. But your best players should outplay Anaheim and Calgary and Columbus's best players, and that's why you're putting it as a top-heavy team. The way that you have to spread the wealth are when you play those stingier teams defensively and teams that are tougher to beat. When you're playing these lesser opponents, these opponents that you should be beating, that's when you could go a little top-heavy and say, look, our top 6 needs to be better than their top 6. That's how we're going to win a hockey game.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Monty handles this thing. I know they had some travel issues today, but back in action tomorrow against the Anaheim Ducks. Pregame for that one will begin right here on 101 ESPN, your home of the St. Louis Blues. Tomorrow with Alex at 6 o'clock. We'll have puck drop for you right here on 101 ESPN tomorrow at 7. I'm guessing they'll have some kind of a skate tomorrow morning, so we'll have some semblance of what the line combinations will be at that point. Coming up next, it's time for the junk drawer here on BK and Ferrario. A little bit of news to pass along. According to Diana Rossini, the Raiders are also requesting an interview with Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo.
Oh, Spags is so back.
That would actually be a really interesting hire, just because I don't think Spags necessarily would be a great head coach. We saw it here. It didn't work. He's an excellent defensive coordinator. Sometimes it just doesn't translate to being a head coach. Maybe it could work at this point in his career. I don't know. Why I would find it interesting is because that would be the Raiders saying, okay, if we can't win, neither can you. You can't have Spags anymore. We are taking him away. Your toy is going to come over here, and he's going to have our defense playing the way that yours does. That's basically what that would be. I don't think they'll hire him, but that's an interesting one. All right.
Jets also interviewing him as well.
I mean, it's smart. You might as well, if nothing else,
Jets
learn
have put
from
everybody
him.
on their
Rex
list.
Ryan has already said he's got the job. So
That's
everybody
amazing.
just needs to stop talking about it.
Let's dive into the junk drawer.
He's got a foot ahead of the competition.
It's pretty good.
T-Bone doesn't get it.
It's pretty good.
I'm
You
not
don't know
gonna
about
ask
his
it.
foot fetish?
You don't know his foot fetish,
I
man?
think I have heard that before, but I wasn't going to ask any follow-up
Rex
questions.
Ryan was basically into OnlyFans before OnlyFans was a thing.
He did a foot OnlyFans.
Good for him.
Not sure that that's true. That's an Alex allegation. Just know he's into feet. All right.
Hey, man.
Have you guys heard of Waymo, the company?
No.
W-A-Y-M-O. Waymo.
No.
So
But I'm sure you're going to tell me way more information.
Alex is on a roll. Reason I ask this is because there was a story about a guy that was picked up in a Waymo. Waymo is basically a self-driving car Uber.
Oh, yeah, these are creepy.
So they're big in California. They have moved over into Arizona, I believe. I think they're starting to get into Atlanta later this year. Right now, it's mostly just in the city. The way that they work, they have to understand everything about the way that the streets are. And so, they have their navigation system. They have to go the routes dozens of thousands of different times. So they're not going state to state, right? You're not having these long trips with them. Well, somebody was in a Waymo, and the car just started circling. He started videotaping it.
I
He's
vomit.
It's a Monday morning, man. I'm in a Waymo car. I'm getting dizzy. I've got a flight to catch. Why am I going in a circle right now? So this was posted on social media. It made the rounds, everything. They said that they fixed the problem. My question to you related to this, how do you guys feel about being in the back of a self-driving car?
I couldn't do
It
it.
takes so much trust to put yourself in that thing.
Yeah.
But are you there?
No.
According to all of the reports, they're safer than getting in a car with a human driver.
Tell that to the guy who spun in circles.
Yeah.
Or they're safer than that probably, but if something goes wrong, at least the human element you can correct. I don't know if I trust a robotic car to correct if something goes wrong.
It's just a lot of trust to put in the AI, but
Not doing it, man.
again, you're just going city. This is not a situation where they're really necessarily getting onto the highway. They're primarily just bar to bar kind of thing, right? I kind of love it.
No
And
way.
the reason why, especially my wife does not like getting in an Uber on her own. She's super uncomfortable with it just because, right? She's 31-year-old girl who's trying to get in the back of an Uber. She has no idea who this person is. You hear the horror stories. They're incredibly
that.
limited.
Dude, at your bachelor party, I panicked because I took that Uber home and I had the map on my phone to make sure she was taking me where I was going, and it was taking me in a different direction. I thought the lady was going to take me back to her place.
So that's where the anxiety comes in for somebody like my wife, for example. And so this would be a great opportunity for her to not have to get into the back of a car, especially if you've been out drinking for a night on your own with a person that you have no idea what their history is. So in that case, I kind of like it. It also makes me unbelievably anxious. I'm also curious to see what the future of this is, man. Is there going to be a point in time, I don't know, 20 years from now, where it's cheaper for me and Alex and T-Bone to have a Waymo pick me up in the morning and I can do work on my way into work than for me to have my own car and spend the money on the gas and everything? If you're a company, right? If you're Amazon, if you have a self-driving car that can get from your warehouse to T-Bone's apartment and your house, Alex, out in South County, whatever.
Jefferson County, you jerk.
I don't need now
They never
to
got it.
hire people to go deliver my goods to that person. I can just have this self-driving car, which eliminates.
Well, walk up to my apartment. You know, when I order DoorDash, I don't want to go outside when it's negative 10 out and get my pizza.
It shoots it out of its little tube. It's like
comes out of a cannon.
Just hit your door.
The potential of all of this, I find to be fascinating and like totally changing potentially. A lot about the way our economy works, but man, I find all of this
I'm glad you find it fascinating. I am scared to death of it because I think the robots are going to take over us all. I've watched iRobot way too much with Will Smith to think that next thing I know, they're going to take over in my house and hold me ransom.
And I want to have some level of control, right? To Alex's point, like if I'm in that car, I don't feel like I have control. That's why I like the idea of I'm behind the wheel. I'm the one that's driving. Even if it had some of the, you know, like some of the gadgets where like you've got the auto lane assist that some cars have now, or it can like parallel park itself. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
but I also want to be the guy that's there, right? Like I can be the one that can take over if something goes wrong.
To that lane assisting, the minivan that we have does that. So like if I start to swerve into the other lane and if I don't have my blinker on or something, it stops me from swerving and pushes me back into it. And I hate that. Like, I like the reminder if I forget to use the blinker, but man, you want to talk about starting an accident, stopping my car for me and pushing me back over. Now I'm going to autocorrect it and try and swerve into the other lane, and I'm going to hit something.
But in this scenario, it doesn't have that issue because it's not swerving, because it's not getting into the other lane, because it has that already ready to go. It's not relying on you, human error.
I feel like this safety is because you're
driven
worried
in circles.
I feel like this safety with the auto run car is more safety from not dealing with the person that's driving that could potentially do something. Which, look, I totally get. Some people can't defend themselves in those situations. Yeah. But I'm more concerned about what happens if thing goes wrong, because it's not the driver or the car that I'm in, it's everyone else around me that I'd be worried about.
Somebody on the text line said, guys, I'm an Amazon Flex driver. Please don't take that job away from me. I think we're way far away from any of this stuff that I'm talking about potentially happening. I find all of it to be really interesting and kind of scary, honestly. Like there is some fear that is associated with it, no doubt about it. Somebody else on the text line said that they had a self-driving rental while their car was in the shop, and quote, it was bleeping awesome. You touch the wheel every 5 minutes or so to keep it engaged, and it just goes and is ready to go for you. Like that's the thing, man. It's going to be interesting to see where this ends up going. Right now, the weather is a problem for it. It's like a place such as St. Louis, not exactly going to be a great place to use.
Imagine getting into a car with no driver in this. All right, I'd like to get to my work, please, and there's nobody in the front seat.
Unexpected events can be problematic, so like the reactions to other drivers or something suddenly appearing in the street, that can be sometimes problematic for these things, but when you're in, Phoenix or LA where it's beautiful 345 days out of the year, you don't deal with some of those same issues weather-wise, and there's few, so it'll be interesting long term to see where this thing ends.
Can't wait to drive in circles continuously. What happens if you puke in an auto car? Do I have to like clean it for them, or does a robot clean that later?
It's a good question.
Because if you drive me in circles for 5 minutes, it's gonna be vomit.
It's a service. I'm guessing it's a service kind of run like a taxi service where they like all go into one parking lot at the end of the night and they clean them overnight and just gets ready to go the next day. The company is really becoming big in California, especially. But again, Phoenix, I think, was the second market that they decided to go
I still don't have one of those Amazon Echoes in my house because I don't like people listening in. So the robots will not take over.
They got you. They got us on our phone. Or they got us.
You just haven't admitted it yet.
They're tracking us at all times.
No, they're not. I got all my trackers off.
Everything
I turned Siri
about
off on my phone.
Is on this phone, which means I lost. I lost the battle. They've got me on Gmail.
I tell Siri every day, don't listen to me. And she says, sure, I won't listen.
There you go. Coming up next, how much power is realistic to project for this Cardinals team? We'll talk about it here on BK and Ferrario. All right, how much power is realistic to project for the Cardinals in 2025? With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We did this for the St. Louis Blues, and I was honestly a little surprised by what we came to. We went through and we're like, okay, what would you project goal-wise for all of these different players? We came to the end, and I was like, oh, Alex is right. This team has more goal-scoring opportunities than we expected going into this. So I wanted to do the same thing or something similar, Alex, with home runs. If you were projecting right now some of the Cardinals when it comes to their home runs, let's get into this.
All right. Okay, here we go.
So, by the way, the reason why I did this, I saw a piece from an analytics guy who had the Cardinals 25th on his projected home runs hit for the upcoming season.
I can see that because we do this game every year.
Yeah, and we're always wrong.
Well, yeah, we always end up like, wow, this could be a really powerful lineup. And then we get like a month in, and we're like, why has Carlson not hit any home runs in the first month? What happened to Paul DeYoung?
And to be fair, those were surprising results. Like, Dylan Carlson went from hitting 18 home runs as a rookie to just having no power ever again in the rest of his major league career. But anyways, I digress. Willson Contreras. How many home runs do you think Willson Contreras will project to hit for the upcoming season, Alex? Now that he is an everyday player at first base /DH.
And we're projecting him to be healthy, I'm assuming. I would say... I'll say 28 home runs.
Okay. T-Bone, what would you go with?
I'd go 30.
Let's go 28 then. I was going to say 25, so we'll kind of end up in the median point. 28 home runs.
There's T-Bone just being way too optimistic.
Avon Herrera / Pedro Pajes. Let's just go ahead and combine them like your catcher situation. How many home runs do you think that they will combine to hit? Last year, they combined to hit 12 for what it's worth in 140 games.
Yeah, I'll say 15.
Oh, I would go more. Man, I'm the one who's fallen into my own trap. I'd go 25.
I would too.
Because I think Herrera's going to add more power to his game.
I think Herrera won't be playing very
average.
much.
Well, that's my fear. And if that's the case, this number will really fall.
A lot of Pedro Pajes.
Hey, Pajes hit the longest home run of any Cardinal last year. Yeah. So take that and shove it up your pipe.
You guys are optimistic about the home runs.
All right, let's go second base. I'm going to assume in this scenario that Arenado's not on the team. You guys good with that?
No, I think we should assume the other way.
Second base, Brendan Donovan. How many home runs do you guys think Brendan Donovan will hit for the upcoming season? I'll go 15.
How many hit last year?
God, remember when he hit him? Remember when he hit him with so many in the early portion? You guys were like, oh my gosh, he's got 25 home runs in him.
I think he's got 15 to 20.
Yeah, I agree. I would go 15 just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, I'll say 15.
All right, so we're all on the same page there. We'll go 15 home runs. Shortstop, Mason Wynn. How many home runs do you think Mason Wynn will hit this year? He had 15 last year, which is a pretty damn good number for him as a rookie.
I would say 18.
Yeah, I would go...
I don't think he gets to 20.
I think he could touch 20. I think he could add. I wonder if he adds more power to his game this year. So I would go 20.
T-Bone's doing the thing.
I know he is. He's getting so freaking excited. Wait till he's in the best shape of his life.
He thought he made fun of us for doing it, and then
you've done it on every one of these.
What can I say, man? I dig the long ball.
No, you just dig the Cardinals.
Slug.
We're going to go 18. He had 15 last year. Alex had 18. He said 20. I'll go 18.
I can't wait till we get to Nolan Gorman.
Oh, yeah.
This guy over here is going to be going 55.
All right, good news. We're to Nolan Gorman.
T-Bone, go ahead and start us off.
I mean, he did hit 19 in 107 games.
He hit 27 in 119 games the year before.
Like, okay, look, I went 40 as a bold prediction last year. I'll temper myself. I'll go 30.
I think 30 is the right number. That's what I would put.
I would put it at
I think he's going to play every day.
I would put it at 28.
30 it is.
29. 29.
30 it is.
God, you guys are way too freaking optimistic.
Lars Nootbaar, who will play 110 games next year, but if he played 162, how would you project his home run power next year, Alex? I would say like 17.
Yeah, I was thinking about 18, so.
I'd go 15. He's the one. I think Donovan's got better power
17
than
it is.
How did we get here, man? How did we get here for Pajes and Herrera 25?
Project him for a full 162. That guy's staying healthy.
Pajes and Herrera 25. Lars Nootbaar 15.
All right, next one up. We're going to center field.
Power.
Oh, here we go, Mike Siani.
Scott/Siani.
10.
Last year, Siani had 2.
Scott had 2, right?
Ended up with 2, so they had 4 together.
Okay, 5.
Yeah, I'll go 5.
I'll go
that feels
7.
right.
7. Oh my God, man! Scott's
5.
going to be in the minors half the season.
I know, but the other half, I think Scott's actually got more power than we give him credit for. You look at his minor league numbers; it's in there. I just don't know if he's going to be able to get to it at the major
Ollie
league
digs
level.
small ball. He's going to tell him to bunt every opportunity.
All right, big one here. Jordan Walker.
I want T-Bone to go first.
Oh, come
Jordan
on.
Walker last year in 51 games had 5 home runs.
What did he hit in year one?
Wasn't it like 15 in the first year?
16.
16,
yeah. I'll go with 15.
By the way, he had 14 combined last year with Memphis and St. Louis.
Yeah, that sucks. I'll go 15. I think he, at minimum, will be a 15 home run guy next year.
I think it's 20.
I go 20 as well. Should we go 18?
Yeah.
Meet in the middle?
Should have met in the middle on the one where it was
17 and a half is actually the...
Last major one, Alec Burleson. He hit 21 home runs last year. Playing time could be different this season, but how many home runs do you think Burley gets?
I like that 21. I think he's probably typically 20 home run hitter, so I'll say 20.
That's what I had it at.
I was going to go 15 because I don't know about playing time.
All right, now Nolan Arenado.
18 home runs. You want to meet in the middle there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if we're projecting Arenado, 15.
So we have them with
Maybe.
3 25-plus home run hitters in the catching situation, Contreras and Gorman.
Yeah, and I only have 2 of those because I don't believe that catching
Does that feel
situation.
about right to you guys?
Yeah.
Last year they had none.
I mean, Gorman could hit 40, but...
Yeah. Last year they had none. I'm saying it's 2.
And 2 years ago they had 3. It was Gorman, Arenado, and Goldie.
Yeah.
After doing this, do you feel better or worse about the potential power that the Cardinals could have in 2025? Power production.
I kind of feel the same. Like this is what I expected from this team. If I see an uptick in home run potential, like if one of Gorman or Walker become that 30 home run guy, that's where I can get excited. But I think this is exactly where this team is at. I don't think there's this big power in terms of home runs. I think their power is going to be in terms of doubles and getting multiple extra base hits more than it's going to be home runs.
We had them projected for 176 home runs with just the guys we did. That's no replacements. That's not like, hey, what could Thomas Sajaci do? Hey, maybe Lucan Baker has a little bit bigger role than what we're currently anticipating. What about if they have somebody else that just comes out of nowhere and becomes a real key? There will be others that end up hitting home runs. So let's call it 185. Last year they had 165. So it'd be a 20 home run increase from where they were a year ago.
I feel better about it. And I said during, I think it was more likely to happen, I think there's a higher ceiling on the offense than there is the pitching. Now, odds are we are going to be off on that by probably a lot. But everything that just played out there was those guys end up not even necessarily hitting their stride, right? Like, I think if Walker hits 15 home runs, to me, that's not him hitting his stride. That's him stabilizing. And I think that's what you're hoping for this year. Isn't so much that Walker gets to the major leagues and takes off and all of a sudden is, wow, that's 30 home runs. That's the superstar. The goal this year for me for Walker is to stabilize. The goal for me for Gorman is to stabilize. And then we can talk about ceiling the following year.
Totally agree with you on this.
And that's why I feel better about them from a power perspective. And I also like what Alex said, right? Like, maybe I'm a little lower on Newbar in terms of his home run numbers, but Newbar could end up becoming a doubles hitter. You know, Mason Wade may not end up becoming a big power hitter, but could he hit for some doubles rather than becoming a slap hitting singles hitter? Can he be a guy that's more gap to gap doubles based? It's possible. We'll see what his approach becomes. So, yeah, I feel better about those numbers that we threw out there. I don't feel great about our chances on hitting on those numbers because we've been wrong every year I've been here. Now that I'm starting to hear myself talk.
25 with the catcher.
Yeah, it might be more me than you two. But I think I do feel better about it, and that's why I did say earlier, I think there's a higher ceiling on the offense than there is on the pitching staff.
Somebody brought up a good point. Splashback deuce. Baker's going to hit 13. A Baker's dozen.
Sure. I don't know where he's getting those, and I don't know when
T-Bone's
they're
not
happening,
going to buy into that.
That's Jason ain't touching that.
For context on kind of what we just did, again, last year they had 165 home runs. That was tied for 23rd in Major League Baseball with the Los Angeles Angels. Not where you want to be. You've got to have more power than that if you're going to be any kind of a contender. We projected them for 175 and then just threw 10 in for other guys that will get playing time, right? Because we just projected basically the starting lineup, the starting 9. There will be others, maybe, like you said, Lucan Baker has 7 of those, whatever. That gets you to about 185, which would have been roughly the range of the Cleveland Guardians, the Seattle Mariners, the Minnesota Twins, the Milwaukee Brewers from a year ago. That's the range that we're talking about. That's 12 to 15 in Major League Baseball last year. I think that's where the Cardinals are hoping to get, because this is not a lineup that is set yet. You probably, when you are a contender again, will need to add one more big-time bat to the middle of your order. Like, you'll want to replace... maybe it's the spot where like Alec Burleson is right now. Something like that, right? Or maybe it is replacing Scott Enciani with somebody else. And then you add in another 20 home runs, and now, boom, you're up there at about 200 home runs in any given season, which is roughly where Houston and Boston were last year. That's what this team wants to become. But for right now, if they can get into the middle of the pack when it comes to power, that's how this team becomes interesting in 2025. And it's not hard to see. These are not outlandish numbers. Wilson Contreras, now that he's an everyday player, 28 home runs, that's not crazy. He's been a consistent 20 to 25 home run guy, and he's playing 120 games because he's playing behind the plate so often. Brendan Donovan, he's been right around 18 home runs the last few years. That's just adding a little bit more pop to his bat. Maybe it's 15. You lose 3 home runs there. Mason Wynn, adding a little bit more pop, which he had down in the minor leagues. I think people undersell it. Gorman, 30 home runs. He basically was that 2 years ago, and last year he stunk. Can he get back to what he was 2 years ago is all that we're asking for.
Stunk and almost hit 20, by the way.
There you go. Lars Nootbaar, 17 home runs. That's pretty much what he's been. He just hasn't been healthy. Can you stay healthy for an extra 15 games this season? Jordan Walker, 18 home runs. Basically what he did 2 years ago. And then Alec Burleson, 18 home runs, which is a down year from what he did as a rookie. The projections for the Cardinals offense are not going to be great anywhere you look this offseason. But I don't think this offense is as bad as some of those projections are baking in, because I don't think that the young guys that had really terrible seasons last year are going to be as bad as they were last year. Maybe I'm also just a hopeless optimist.
You guys are, but it's okay. It's
We're
that
gonna
time
live
of the
longer,
year.
You know?
I get to do it up until about February when the Blues kill my hopes, and then you guys do it when the Cardinals. And you'll be done in like May. Although if you're BK, you'll stick it until like September.
No, last year I was
good
done
for
by
you.
July.
And then you got back on in August, and then you were done. We get it, man. It was a choo-choo train that just never stopped.
Yeah, we gave up around my birthday last year.
What was your birthday?
August 18th.
How
Yeah,
dare
that's
you
about
not know when his birthday was?
I've got it in my phone.
No, you
Don't have it.
Just don't lie to us.
Yeah.
People can see on camera that you're full of BS.
Is Chris Kerber joining us today?
I don't know, man. Travel issues.
The voice of the Blues might be joining us in about 15 minutes or so. Coming up next, though, what is your level of confidence that Lamar Jackson can avoid his previous playoff pitfalls? We'll get into that next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley for our friends at Circus Sports in Illinois. This is the time when you're going to want to be betting with them, Alex. It's the playoffs for the NFL. It's also the semifinals in the college football playoffs. So, starting tomorrow night, we've got Notre Dame versus Penn State. I've got Notre Dame minus the 1 point in that one. And then going into the Ohio State versus Texas game, I like Ohio State minus the points. I also like the under in that game. Think the under is a good play there because of the Ohio State defense. So, expecting those 3 plays to hit. $10 bet wins $60 with our friends at Circus Sports in Illinois.
You know what, BK? Put like 4 more bets onto that big parlay, and you're going to be bringing home the most money possible when you win, because Circa is not limiting you based off of your winnings. You hear BK talk about those great lines. All of that, Circa Sports Illinois is so confident in, they tell people to go check out other sports betting apps because they know you'll come back when you check out those lines from different sports books. Plus, when you're dealing with them, you're dealing with actual people, not chat bots. So download the Circa Sports app today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So, Alex, yesterday I was reading from a Baltimore Ravens site, and they were asking the question that I think a lot of us internally are wondering right now. Is this the year that it's different? Is this the year that Lamar Jackson finally breaks through in the postseason and looks like the guy that he has been in his NFL regular season career? Because he's probably going to end up being at least a top 2 candidate this year for the MVP. Maybe even the guy that wins it, potentially winning his 3rd MVP. And yet, when he gets to the postseason in his NFL career, we all know how it's going to end. He's going to crash and burn. He's going to go up against a really good defense, and he's going to look not only human, but vulnerable in that game. Well, he's probably going to be without Zay Flowers this weekend in their game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that at times has given him some troubles offensively. My question for you guys, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL is where the graveyard chat is available for you as well. What's your level of confidence that it'll be different this time around? First against the Steelers, then probably against the Bills, and then if he ends up doing it in that, eventually against Kansas City on the road.
On a scale of 1 to 10, a 2. I don't trust him. Whether it's the interceptions he's given up. This last one, he threw 1 interception, but in his last 3 playoff seasons, he's given up a total of 5 interceptions in, 5 games? And then he's also fumbled the ball 4 times in the playoff games. I don't trust him. I don't trust him like I don't trust Dak Prescott. And until you prove me wrong, I'm going to continue doubting you. And if you're telling me that you don't have your weapon, and typically with Lamar Jackson in those big moments when the brights are the lightest, you don't look around and look for other guys to help you through. You try and win the game yourself. And that's when those mistakes take place. So I think the Steelers are going to cause them massive fits in terms of defense. And I'm very concerned that he's going to make those mistakes in terms of fumbles or interceptions. And if you get through the Steelers, I don't think you do it against the Bills because I think the Bills are the better team. So put it at a 2.
I would go at like a 5. I'm a little bit more optimistic, mostly because I think he's running into the Steelers at the right time because they've really scuffled down the home stretch. And, like, the Buffalo Bills defense is fine. I wouldn't call it great by any measure. But the one thing to your point of, like, hey, if you're without Zay Flowers, there's more pressure on me, so maybe I have to do my thing, especially because we know teams are going to load up the box in the playoffs to stop the run because we've seen if you can stop Derrick Henry, really increase your chances to beat the Baltimore Ravens. It's not so much turnovers that also hurt him. BK's brought this up a ton before. It's the big sacks that he takes as well, right? Because of what you're talking about. I got to do something myself. Maybe I'm going to hold the ball a little bit longer in the pocket. You can't do that in the playoffs. You can't take the sacks that end up killing drives.
26 sacks in his 6 playoff games.
That can't happen. And when you go up against Pittsburgh, T.J. Watt's coming after you. If you do get past them, Von Miller's coming after you with Buffalo. Like, you can't make those big-time mistakes of not just turning the ball over, but taking those critical sacks. I think this might be the year where we kind of have the narrative change a little bit on Lamar, but I don't feel great about saying that because I have seen him choke in the playoffs before. That's why I'm kind of at a 5. I think if this is the year that it needs to happen.
Man, I think I'm at a 7.
Wow.
I think Lamar looks like a different player right now. And here's where I run into some potential issues. I think his path is as hard as it's ever been, man. This is a brutal path to the Super Bowl for Baltimore. First, you start out by playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who always have a good game plan going up against the Ravens. I think they'll win this. I think there's a decent chance they cover in this game. I just don't think Pittsburgh is I think they're the second worst playoff team this year in either side of the bracket, but certainly on the AFC side. I think the Texans are the worst, and then I would have Pittsburgh as the second worst. So I think they win that game pretty handily. I think he looks really good in it. But then you got to go to Buffalo on the road. McDermott's a really good defensive coach, man. And the Buffalo Bills have one of the 3 best turnover differentials, not just this year in the NFL, in the last 25 years of playing NFL organized football. They are a team that turns people over a lot. They do a really good job of confusing quarterbacks, and they put pressure on you. All of those things that we were just talking about with Lamar, those are his potential issues. They're probably going to be exposed, at least to some degree, in that game. And even if he's able to overcome that, now you're going up against Steve Spagnuolo, who has made you look silly at times in the postseason. A guy that has all of the pressure schemes that you could possibly ask for to make you uncomfortable. He'll change and disguise his coverages. Like, he is just not in a good path to get to the Super Bowl. So I think Lamar's going to play better this year. I just don't know how much that matters for this version of the Baltimore Ravens, but it's all going to be blamed on him either way. If they lose and they don't get to the Super Bowl, it's going to continue to be the same thing, right or wrong. Lamar can't get it done in the big moment. And I think that's probably going to be unfair to him, but I think that's the way we're likely headed.
Yeah, he just doesn't make the decisions that winning quarterbacks make in those big games. And some of it's not going to be all on Lamar. I think you're going to see slip-ups on some type of defensive special teams. Like, that typically is the trickle-down effect. But the snowball begins with your quarterback. And one mistake leads to a team losing their confidence. And I don't look at Lamar Jackson the same way I look at it. And I know Josh Allen hasn't won anything either, but I don't look at Lamar the same way I look at Josh Allen. I look at Patrick Mahomes. I look at, honestly, Matt Stafford when he's won it with the Rams, because those guys always seem to take their game to the next level when a big moment comes in front of them, and Lamar Jackson kind of has crumbled in the past.
I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions here. BK game, you ready? There have been 38 quarterbacks that have thrown at least 150 passes in the postseason since 2000. So since the turn of the century, 38 different quarterbacks have thrown at least 150 passes. Where do you think Lamar ranks on that list in terms of his sack rate? Percentage of his dropbacks in which he is sacked.
Well, I'm going to go last. This is a BK game? Last place.
He has the highest sack rate. He is sacked on 12% of his dropbacks in the postseason.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
In his NFL career. Now, let's go to another one. Quarterback rating, right? Where do you guys think that Lamar Jackson ranks in the postseason among those 38 quarterbacks in quarterback rating?
38th, Brandon.
I bet he's high. This is going to be something wild.
Yeah, this is a BK game.
He's got to be top 5.
He is 34th.
Oh, damn.
Here are the quarterbacks behind him. Jeff Garcia. Surprising.
I almost said who, but I know Jeff Garcia.
You're not familiar with Jeff Garcia?
He was part of the St. Louis Rams there for a little bit.
Man, Jeff Garcia. I've had him on as a guest before.
I think he was a quarterback coach for the. You thought he was like a quarterback coach or a consultant or something.
I was like, I don't remember him playing for the St. Louis Rams.
No, he was
Andrew
there with
Luck is below him, surprisingly enough. Steve McNair, also a little bit of a surprise there, and then Andy Dalton is below him as well. But other guys in that same area, Jake Delhomme, who threw like 3 pick sixes in a Super Bowl and was never the same. Kerry Collins, Chad Pennington. It's not a place where you want to be if you're Lamar. So it's time, man. It is time for Lamar Jackson to overcome some of these playoff struggles. All right, last thing here that I wanted to get to. Can we rank our teams 1 through 5 in terms of most likely to least likely to win the Super Bowl this year? Are you guys open to doing this before we get to the postseason?
What would you have said if I said no? No, man, I ain't doing that. Sorry,
all right,
man.
Coming up next, we'll see if Chris Kerber's going to answer a call.
No, I changed my answer. No.
He's not answering.
Well, I don't think he doesn't text me, so no.
Who would you guys have as the most likely team right now to win the Super Bowl?
Bills.
That's who I have. I have Bills at 1.
Really?
Yeah.
I've got the Chiefs.
Of course you do, buddy.
Who do you guys have at number 2?
I got your Chiefs.
Do you?
Yeah.
No, I've got the Eagles.
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I like T-Bone's
I
list.
thought about going Eagles 1.
I like T-Bone's list.
It's ballsy. I have the Bills, too. Who do you guys have as the third most likely team to win the Super Bowl this year?
I got the Eagles.
Chiefs. I got Chiefs at 3.
I've got the Ravens.
Okay, well, your list
Now
sucks.
that's cojones.
I think one of the teams coming out of the AFC will win the Super
The
Bowl. this
Ravens
year.
aren't even in my top 5.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't have them top 5 either.
Really?
Yeah. I think they
trust
lose in the
guys.
second
Yeah,
round.
I think they lose against Pittsburgh.
Who did you have as your third team?
Eagles.
Damn. No, my
Or
third team was Chiefs.
Yeah,
Chiefs.
so
Okay.
T-Bone and I have the same top 3. It's
Number
just different
4?
order. I have the Lions at number 4.
All right, I'm going to pull BK here. Rams at 4.
I have the Rams at number 5.
Yeah.
Who's your 5?
My 5 is Lions.
Oh, T-Bone and I got the same list.
I think with the Rams, look, they've been playing really good football.
I think
I
they're-
always thought they had this kind of performance in them. Everybody freaked out early on. They were hurt. Their offense is playing at an elite level right now. Now, they still have some struggles protecting Stafford, which could become a problem. But I think the defense can do enough to get them a couple of stops to where the offense can go win them a football game.
I think they
and
got
the
the-
NFC's weaker, in my opinion.
And I think they got the easier path, too.
Yeah.
They're going to avoid the number 1 seed, probably in that, or not probably. They'll avoid that number 1 seed. You got the Vikings, which is probably your toughest competition, but none of us believe in Sam Darnold. And then you're probably taking on the Commanders in that second round. If the Commanders find a way
They'd
to.
get the Lions. They would get the Eagles. If they match up with the Eagles will be a very tough matchup for them.
But I think their defense could find a way to stop Saquon Barkley, and I would take Stafford in that
I
offense
wouldn't
over.
count on that.
I think their defense has played better as of late.
The reason I put Lions all the way at 5, by the way, is because I don't trust their defense. I still think that offense can carry them potentially.
And that's why I
But I
have
think in
them
the
at 4.
playoffs, you've got to get stops. I don't know if that defense is going to be capable.
I think
of
their
it.
offense will be
But I
good
don't
enough
trust anybody else in the
to
AFC.
get them to the point where all they need is one stop. And I trust them to get one stop.
To finish out my list, I've got the Lions 4 and the Packers 5.
Well, one thing that would have never surprised me is Packers on this top 5 list. A team that's going to get bounced in the first round.
Somebody wonky is going to get into the NFC Championship game. I don't know who it's going to be.
The Rams.
It could be. Totally could be. I don't know who it's going to be, but like the Commanders could be playing in the NFC Championship game, and we're like, what the? But Jaden Daniels could just have this crazy run in him. It shouldn't shock anybody. The NFC is wide open. The Buccaneers. Nobody should be shocked if they're playing in the NFC Championship game. Baker Mayfield's playing at a top 7 quarterback level right now. They have 2 excellent wide receivers with Mike Evans and now Jalen McMillan playing as well as he is. And Todd Bowles is a really good defensive mind. He could make things difficult for Jaden Daniels this week. And then next week they end up playing against, let's call it the Eagles. And Jalen Hurts just pees down his leg in a playoff game. That could happen.
I think Jaden Daniels is more likely to win because they were considered to be top 5 for me, but I just didn't want to put them there. I think they're more likely, Jaden Daniels, than the Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. I would have the Commanders more likely to, because like we said, the NFC is not great. I think Jaden Daniels could get to a Super Bowl, and then now you're talking about one game.
It's weird to say,
It's
but
a fun playoff.
I think
The NFC is as much fun as I've had with a bracket recently.
I agree. I think when I look at the playoff field, I think there are only 2 teams that can win the Super Bowl. It's a different conversation if I say get to the Super Bowl, but
Chiefs and
win the
Bills.
Super Bowl, I think it's just those 2 teams. I think the NFC, it's a little easier to convince yourself of maybe 3 teams.
And that's why I had the Ravens in my top 3. The one scenario that I would say somebody other than those 2 teams could win the Super Bowl is if Lamar just goes crazy. Just goes absolutely nuts, and their defense continues what they've done over the last 6 weeks, which is be the number 1 pass defense in the NFL. That is a formula that can win in the playoffs. And I know John Harbaugh is one of the best coaches in the league. Like, if you have that put together, it's the one team that I think does actually have what it takes to potentially to beat the Bills and the Chiefs. The problem is they might have to beat both of them, and that ain't going to be easy. If you're the Ravens, what you want is for this weekend, the Denver Broncos to somehow knock off the Bills. If that happens, now we're talking. Now you only have to potentially beat one of the Chiefs or the Bills. Beating both is going to be
You want some great news? Voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. We're calling him next.
Here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, Chris Kerber with you here, and you know what? You've heard me now for a little while talk about the folks at Classic Air Care, and I keep telling you to go onto their website at classicaircare.com. Check out all the different reviews they have. Well, I'm going to give you one from a personal experience. They came out to the house a little while ago to service the furnace that I have. This thing's about 8 years old. It's running well, but I want to make sure it's still running at a peak performance. They checked every aspect of it out, including putting a thermometer in one part of it to gauge the hot air that's blowing out of the unit and making sure that the variance to one of the vents in another part of the house is where it is supposed to be. That's one of the things that they do to make sure that the furnace is running properly. They vacuumed everything out. They gave it a good, clean bill of health, and things have continued to run perfectly right through the winter so far. For more reviews like that and to experience that kind of service, when you are in need of service for your HVAC unit, make sure you keep Classic Air Care in mind. You're going to get that kind of quality and that kind of peace in mind. You can filters online. You can even get a quote for a new unit online. ClassicAirCare.com. They've been making people comfortable since 1926.
Tanner Hendricks near the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues fell the Wild last night 6-4. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they host the Anaheim Ducks. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. And the voice of the Blues joins us next here on BK and Ferrario. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent Mayor Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Fresh off the plane, Chris Kerber joining us now here via the Callier and Thompson hotline. He is the voice of the Blues. You heard him on the call last night for the Blues versus the Minnesota Wild. Unfortunately, that one did not go St. Louis's way. They lose that one 6-4, consecutive 6-4 losses, both on the road. Chris Kerber joining us now on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, we appreciate the time as always, man. What would you say was the number one thing that went wrong for the Blues last night?
You know what? I think, and actually, BK, if we look at both games on this short little road trip, it's the one time you very rarely talk about this way, but I think this was a back-to-back game where the goaltending just wasn't what it needed to be. You know, you were able to score 8 goals over these 2 games, and you ended up not getting a point out of it. So that being the case, it was just one of those where, yeah, maybe there were some screens. Yep, there were obviously some crazy bounces, some things like that. But in the end, it's one of those where I think if you really look at it honestly, you can look at different aspects of the game that probably need to be better. But and starts to the period last night were a massive part of that. But having said that, I think you got to lump the goaltending in there on this one, and it's very rarely that we ever really kind of feel that should be done, you know?
Kerbs, did anything stick out to you in terms of just the format on the defensive side of the game that led to those opportunities for Minnesota?
No, you know what? Jim Montgomery has obviously really harped on, being ready to start the game. And I think if you look at anything last night, Minnesota came out and really was strong in the first couple minutes of each period, and the Blues kind of got things going. They got moving in there, but the reality of it is it was a really difficult start for them in each of the periods. And if there's any part of the game that bit them, I would have to say that it was definitely that part. So. Yeah, you know what? No, I don't know if there was anything, real structure-wise. I'm sure the coaches are going to find some breakdowns and going to find some coachable moments, But the reality of it is you scored 4 goals in each of these last 2 games. The problem is you gave up 5 in each one before the empty netters.
Curbs, we were talking about this a little bit earlier today. Like, do you shuffle up the lines? Do you try to mix things up a little bit? And as we did it, we're like, you just feel like you're a guy or two short potentially up front. Regardless of how you end up constructing it, it always leaves me thinking, man, if there was another little upgrade here. Do you think this is more of a personnel issue, what we've come to over the last couple of games, or is it something that they can solve by just shaking things up a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I don't know that you need to shake things up because honestly, BK, I keep trying to keep in mind where this team is in that retool, rebuild, whatever. Now, if the expectations of the hockey ops department is that there should be more of, that this should be closer to a playoff team. All right, well, you went into that game last night 3 points out of a playoff spot, right? So let's look at it first off. Do you shake up the lines? I don't know that there's anybody in the roster or in the lineup right now or on the roster right now, and maybe aside from Dvorsky, who I don't think you want to bring up yet, I don't know that there's any way that you really do a whole lot of shuffling. Like, I don't think Toropchenko is going to end up in the top 6, right? Zach Bolduc has still got a lot to learn when you talk about the coaches, and he's playing really well learning that in a third-line role. And go back to the way Robert Thomas learned his first couple of years in the league. There are things like that. I do think that it's still just a patient approach that, if down the line here you find somebody that you think could help fill in your top 6 that shifts down into the bottom 9 then, or make it a top 9, maybe that's the case. But if you look at the future that's coming, you want to be ready for those guys too. So, I still think that, and when I talk to the coaches and you talk to the players, this is still where they're building a foundation of getting back to a winning style of hockey, and it's coming. Jim Montgomery's adamant. He even said it on the ice in practice the other day. It's coming, guys. Stay with the process. Just stay with the process. And he knows what he's doing. So, I think they'll be fine. It's just they really had to get some bad habits out of their games.
Curbs, one line in these last couple of games that has really stuck out to me has been Holloway, Schenn, and Jordan Kyrou. And I think a lot of people go to Kyrou's name because he's the guy that's produced the 30-plus goals in the season. But, man, Dylan Holloway now has a point streak in 5 straight games. He's also got points in 6 of his last 7 games. What have they untapped in Dylan Holloway's play this season?
Well, when you assign those two guys to those sheets, the one word that is talked about is opportunity. And if you remember some of the initial things, well, you got to overpay a little bit to get a young player in this situation. Well, there's the one thing that we know for sure. I don't think either one of those players is underperforming their current contract. As a matter of fact, you could probably make the case they're outperforming it. Having said that, it's just been about opportunity for Dylan Holloway. I don't think Dylan Holloway was going to get power play time and opportunity with the Edmonton Oilers, considering that group that they have there. You look at where they were at and where that organization was. Who knows if Dylan Holloway was really going to get top 6-minute opportunities there. And that's exactly what he's getting here. When you watch his game, he's absolutely relentless on the puck. He was using his speed in recovering pucks, like he was wearing number 90 and had O'Reilly on his name last night, and there's that's just a work ethic. And what's growing is his confidence just continues to feed itself and feed itself and feed itself. And with that, he's earning more opportunity and more ice time there. So Jim Montgomery is one thing about him that he has said, like even with Brandon Saad moving up to that top line, it wasn't, hey, we're going to put this guy on the top line and just see how it goes, see if we can get it to click. He goes, he's earned that with his effort, with his work, and with some of his games. And it's the same thing with Dylan Holloway. He's earned it. And, man, oh, man, he's a difference maker on there. And, listen, I think you got to give a lot of credit, too, as well, to Jordan Kyrou. Guys, there are times, and he earns it when you talk about the turnovers and sometimes the play that's a mishap, but you can see the foundation that Jim Montgomery is pulling out of him with that work ethic on that ice, with the retrieval of pucks, with the skating. And it's creating a pretty doggone good line for the St. Louis Blues.
It's been a lot of fun to watch. They've got to get the goals allowed under control over the last couple of games. But like you said, Curbs, they scored 8 goals in those ones. Should be able to win those games when you're able to do that. Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues. He joins us each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. We appreciate him making some time for us today. Curbs, all the best, man. We'll talk with you again soon.
All right, guys, have a great rest of the week. We'll see you at the rink tomorrow night.
See you, Curbs.
It's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as it does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. We'll hit the rewind coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK to tell you about my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is time for you to unlock your inner champion. It's January, which means a lot of you are probably working on some of those New Year's resolutions. And for a lot of people, that means losing some of the unwanted weight from the holiday season. They could potentially help you out with that over at Victory Men's Health. So go ahead and check them out today. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. And the easiest way to book your first appointment, go online, victorymenshealth.com. When you get there, top right corner of the page, click book now. Put your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and tell them a little bit about how they can unlock your inner champion. That means different things for different people. For some, it's those weight loss goals that you're trying to meet. For others, maybe you're getting into your 40s, 50s. Low testosterone is something that can arise at that point in time for you. And if it is, you might be feeling a little sluggish as you're walking around. You're not getting the same amount out of your workouts. That's all stuff that can potentially be put for low testosterone. They can help you out with that over at Victory Men's Health. They'll go ahead and take a lab test for you to draw that, and then they can check out exactly where your levels are. They'll unlock your inner champion for you the way that they have for me at Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. Hey, if you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
You can check it out at 101ESPN.com or the free 101 ESPN app, which is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We were able to be joined today by Chris Kerber. We talked a little bit in the open about the Blues goaltending and how they're going to have to get more than this if they're going to be a playoff team this year. Also, we're able to discuss the Cardinals' plans in center field and how that can potentially unlock this jigsaw puzzle if Nolan Arenado ends up being here for 2025. All of that available for you after the show today at 101ESPN.com or on the free 101 ESPN app. All right, a little bit of an update to another story that we've been monitoring today. Diana Rossini, tweeting out, Bill Belichick has no plans, Alex, to return to the NFL. She is told that his sole focus is coaching and recruiting for North Carolina. He continues to build the Tar Heels' future. He is recruiting today in New Jersey. The story earlier was that Tom Brady had reached out to Bill Belichick, and the Raiders were at least exploring the idea of Bill Belichick being their next head coach. What's your reaction to him saying, no, I'm good?
I like it, Bill. Just tell Tommy B just to suck it. Be like, sorry, Tom, I'm staying at UNC. You got to me too late, buddy. I think it's a smart move by Belichick. I think the Raiders are a disaster, and I don't even think he fixes that disaster. And at least you've got a little bit more job security in college, which I know college is a lot more difficult to do the coaching aspect rather than the NFL. But, man, you go to the Raiders, and you're bad this year, and then next year you're bad. He's gone. UNC, I think you're going to be a little bit more of a leash because it is Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I think he's at the better job right now. And that feels wild to say. But he can win in the ACC. Like, if he can figure out, now this is the tough part. He's got to figure out the whole recruiting thing and NIL, which is not easy.
Yeah.
But he can build the roster he wants, and he's in a weak conference in the ACC. I mean, you mentioned the division, though it's fewer teams than in the ACC. That division, the AFC West, is loaded with a bad roster that he's going to have to start from scratch. So I think he's at the better job. I think it makes sense for him to stay at North Carolina.
I think so, too. We mentioned it during the segment. Like, hey, I think from the Raiders' perspective, I don't blame them for reaching out. I think it would have been a smart hire for the Raiders, given what their alternatives are. If Ben Johnson's willing to take that job, I mean, hire Ben Johnson. If you could go out there and get Mike Vrabel, yeah, go get Mike Vrabel. But if and probably when those two tell you no, this is a decent pivot for them. It's the same reason why I said yesterday for the Bears, like, I understand why you could potentially explore a Mike McCarthy or Pete Carroll answer to your head coaching questions. At a certain point, you just need baseline competency at that position. The Raiders have not had that in a while, and frankly, the Bears haven't either. So we'll see what ends up taking place this week with some of these interviews that are being scheduled for those that are interested in Chiefs news here in St. Louis. There are some of you. I know Steve Spagnuolo has been requested by both the Jets and the Raiders as well. Those two teams are going to interview him. Lots of interviews scheduled for this week for the Detroit Lions coordinators as well. We'll continue to monitor that. We will certainly be breaking things down for the college football playoff tomorrow here on the show. We will also be joined by Joey Vitale and Katie Wu to explore what she knows right now about the latest with Nolan Arenado and his future here in St. Louis. For Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane is coming up next here on 101 ESPN.